Chapter 878. Greetings, Your Majesty. Even though he had seen the other side of the Empress before, Jing Cheng still bowed to Tang Guo obediently. His movements were neat and tidy, completely different from the guy who wanted to show off before. His eyes didn't wander around, and he looked at Tang Guo with a very serious gaze. Imperial husband, you haven't answered my question. Jing Cheng didn't quite understand why the Empress was suddenly interested in him. Moreover, the Empress seemed to be a little different. Previously, in front of others, she looked the same as before, without any changes. Only when she stared at him, there were some changes. Jing Cheng, who had been deep in the palace, suddenly understood. Could it be that the Empress had some thoughts? Of course, he didn't think that the Empress had any thoughts about him. She probably wanted to use him to do something, or use his identity to do something, or even want his identity. However, with his intuition, the Empress didn't seem to want to drive him out of this position. Jing Cheng didn't care about the position of the Empress's husband at all. His status was high. During this period, as long as there were no big mistakes, he would definitely be the Empress's husband in the end, or the late Emperor himself. But compared to being the Empress's husband, he still wanted to go to the battlefield. His father and mother had met on the battlefield. Compared to the other courtiers' families, their Jing family was still a little different. In the Jing family, it was rare that men and women were much more equal. He didn't have any ill feelings towards the Empress, nor did he have any special good feelings. Since entering the palace, he had seen her a few times. After all, he was the Empress's husband, and the Empress was not an adult yet. Even if she didn't do anything, she would still take the time to visit his palace. The Empress was undoubtedly a qualified Empress. Before that, the other party would choose a time a month to visit the various palaces. The rest of the time was basically spent worrying about the country and the people, dealing with political affairs. However, ever since Su Qing and Nan Yunchuan entered the palace, the Empress had indeed looked at them in a new light. But he still didn't care about these things. If the Empress didn't like him, that would be the best. He still had a lot of time to practice martial arts. He was the Empress's husband, so he could do whatever he wanted in his own palace. No one dared to disturb him. Even if the Empress had someone she favored, as long as he didn't make any mistakes, she wouldn't embarrass him. In fact, this kind of life. Imperial husband? Are you daydreaming? Tang Guo moved closer. Jing Cheng hurriedly woke up, apologized, and answered the question just now. The weather is good today, and I also want to go to the Imperial Garden to admire the flowers and bask in the sun. What he said was true. But when he saw the jealous male attendants in the distance, his expression became uneasy. Everyone was waiting for the Empress here. He had chosen the wrong time today. Is that so? Tang Guo moved closer and looked into Jing Cheng's eyes. Zhen thought that Imperial hubby came here to wait for Zhen. It seems that Zhen misunderstood and thought that Imperial hubby was also interested in Zhen. Jing Cheng, I'm sure there's something wrong with this Empress. The Empress was a serious person. She would never joke around, let alone say such flirtatious words to him. His mind was filled with all sorts of thoughts. At this moment, a decent-looking male attendant walked over and bowed to Tang Guo with a smile on his face. Greetings, Your Majesty. Rise. Tang Guo's smile disappeared and she resumed her previous expression, which made Jing Cheng's suspicion disappear. Her Majesty was still that Her Majesty, that's right. So, how could Her Majesty be different in front of him? Chapter 879. Seeing that Tang Guo was paying attention to him, the male attendant was overjoyed. He was about to ask Tang Guo if she wanted to sit at his place. He had heard that Her Majesty liked flower tea and was about to show off his skills. In the end, Tang Guo spoke first. Since we've met His Majesty here, why don't you take a walk with me? Tang Guo raised her hand and motioned for Jing Cheng to support her. Jing Cheng endured the confusion in his heart and obediently walked to her side and raised his hand. Then, a small, warm hand rested on his arm. The moment it touched his arm, he had a very strange feeling. He stared at that beautiful, jade-like hand. In that instant, he had an impulse to hold it. Of course, it was only for a moment. He hurriedly suppressed the thoughts that he shouldn't have and continued to support Tangguo forward without looking sideways. The smile on the male attendant's face stiffened. He looked at Jing Cheng with a very vicious gaze. Jing Cheng seemed to sense something and couldn't help but look back. However, the other party had already looked away with his head lowered. But with his intuition as a martial arts practitioner, the other party's gaze was like a knife. It was very unfriendly. Why is His Majesty looking at those little luoluos? Do you really think they can do anything to you? Tangguo spoke at this time. The words she said shocked Jing Cheng. What did Her Majesty mean by this? No matter how he heard it, it sounded like she was protecting him. This must be an illusion. He couldn't help but glance at Tangguo from the corner of his eye. Seeing that she was looking at him with a smiling gaze, he hurriedly looked away. Something was wrong. The Empress was especially strange when she was in front of him. There was no problem that the Empress could smile. Everyone would have moments when they were happy and would smile. But the Empress's smile was always very shallow. But in front of him, she smiled so brightly. He couldn't help but think more. So, what did Her Majesty mean by this? Your Majesty, we're about to reach the end of the Imperial Garden. Seeing that they were about to walk out of the Imperial Garden, the two didn't speak during this time, so Jing Cheng had to remind her. If they continued walking, they would reach another place. I see. Tangguo came to her senses and glanced at Jing Cheng's puzzled expression. She felt happy. It's time for lunch. Jing Cheng's heart relaxed. That's right, Your Majesty the Empress, quickly return to your palace for lunch. Taking a walk wasn't fun at all. Let's go to my husband's palace for dinner today. Tangguo didn't give Jing Cheng a chance and directly ordered. Soon, her words would reach the imperial kitchen, and all the meals would be sent to the imperial husband's palace. Jing Cheng was speechless. Imperial husband, let's go. The sun is getting hot and Zhen is thirsty. I want to drink some water. Tangguo looked at Jing Cheng as she spoke. Jing Cheng braced himself and nodded. He supported Tangguo into his palace. When he arrived at the palace, he hurriedly ordered someone to make tea for Tangguo. He remembered that she had previously mentioned that she liked flower tea. He was a martial artist, so he could hear sounds from far away. When he gave the order, he subconsciously said, "Make some fresh flower tea for Her Majesty." After he finished speaking, he saw Tangguo looking at him with a pair of satisfied eyes. He thought that was it, but Tangguo still opened her mouth to speak. Imperial husband still understands Zhen's preferences. Jing Cheng wanted to say, "No, Your Majesty, you misunderstood." This was what he had accidentally heard just now. In this harem, Jing Cheng actually understands that Zhen likes flower tea. Tangguo didn't give Jing Cheng a chance to explain. When the flower tea was served, she drank it with a satisfied expression. Jing Cheng, what if Her Majesty misunderstands? Chapter 880. System, Dear Host, what's wrong with Jing Cheng? Suddenly, he thought of something and screamed. Host, is he that guy? Looking at Tangguo's smiling eyes, the system remembered that Tangguo said that Jing Cheng was especially handsome when he was dancing with his sword. The system understood everything. No wonder the dear host was so happy after confirming that Jing Cheng did not do anything wrong to her. No wonder the dear host specially looked at the plot. The Jing family was absolutely loyal to the Empress. At that time, Nan Yunchuan and the others wanted to get rid of the Jing family first. Although the Empress was young, she was not stupid. When she found out that there was a conspiracy, she went along with it and removed Jing Cheng's identity as the Empress. Moreover, she sent General Jing to guard the border. This should be the last thing this young Empress could do. As for the later part of the plot, Jing Cheng joined the army and went to the battlefield. General Jing did not seem to have given up on avenging the Empress. As for the later part of the plot, there was nothing. Because these plots did not belong to the female lead's world. Because this small world ended with the death of the female lead. It was a tragedy. Imperial husband, what do you like to eat? Tangguo put down the teacup and asked Jing Cheng with her chin propped up. Jing Cheng almost knocked the cup over, but he quickly said, I'm not picky. Oh, so you like to eat everything? Yes. He was indeed not picky. He could eat anything that could enter his mouth. Because he had to practice martial arts every day, his appetite was still a little big. My imperial husband is really an easy person to raise. Tangguo said with a smile, didn't I make a profit? Forgive Jing Cheng for not being able to stay calm. The Empress was really strange. When lunch was served, Jing Cheng was still very reserved at first. Even if he really wanted to eat, he still held it in. The Empress's lunch was indeed sumptuous. It was much better than his. It looked very tempting. Of course, it tasted very delicious. Imperial husband, didn't you say you were not picky? Why aren't you eating? Tangguo asked. She had secretly watched this guy eat. Although his movements were elegant and he looked good eating, he was not as reserved as before. However, she would never pretend to be reserved like she was now. Her eating speed was not slow, and her appetite was also very big. Jing Cheng couldn't keep up the pretense any longer. Your subject's appetite is a little big. I'm afraid I'll offend your majesty if I finish. It's fine. Go ahead and eat. We like watching you eat. Jing Cheng's hand trembled and he almost smashed the bowl. However, he also believed that the Empress would not blame him for anything. He tried to speed up while observing the Empress's expression. She indeed looked very happy. At first, he was just testing the waters. Later on, the food was simply too delicious and suited his appetite. In addition, he had been practicing martial arts the entire morning, so he was indeed a little hungry. It didn't take long for her to show her true colors. Not only did she eat quickly, but she was also very good-looking. Tangguo took 2 bites and watched him eat. The pale-faced servant beside Jing Cheng wanted to stop her, but was stopped by Tangguo's gaze. The palace servant's face was filled with despair. He was an old man brought into the palace by Jing Cheng's family. Seeing his young master eating so impolitely in front of the Empress, he really wanted to faint. Young master, eat slowly, eat less. Her Majesty the Empress is watching. However, Jing Cheng had already gradually relaxed. It was as if the person sitting beside him was not the Empress, but a normal person. He was satisfied and full. Suddenly, he thought of something and his entire body stiffened. He glanced at the almost empty dishes and then at the pale-faced palace servant. He couldn't smile anymore. Chapter 881. My imperial husband's appetite is really good. Looks like I've been negligent and neglected you. Tangguo drank her tea happily, as if she didn't see Jing Cheng's stiff expression. She ordered the chief steward beside her, in the future, add 4 more dishes for my imperial husband's lunch and dinner. Bring more of the usual pastries for my imperial husband as well. Jing Cheng thought, is there something wrong with this? Since you're my imperial husband, I won't let you starve. If it's not enough, send someone to tell the chief steward, and he'll make the arrangements. What else could Jing Cheng say? The Empress really didn't mind him eating so much, and even wanted to add more dishes for him. 4 more dishes for lunch and dinner. Jing Cheng's worry disappeared, and his impression of the Empress improved. She even wanted to prepare pastries for him. This time, he looked at Tangguo with a much gentler gaze. No matter what the Empress's motive was, he would still cooperate fully for the sake of food. Thinking about how the Jing family was loyal to the Empress, it wasn't a big deal for the Empress to treat him differently. So the Empress's performance was actually a sign of her trust in him. She suddenly got closer to him and rewarded him. Most likely, she wanted him to do something for her in the future. After thinking it through, Jing Cheng accepted the reward with a clear conscience. Not long after sending Tangguo away, he also received a lot of other rewards. It wasn't a jade pendant, gold, silver, or satin. It was a top-notch sword. Looking at the sword, Jing Cheng's eyes lit up, and his impression of the Empress improved. Tangguo, on the other hand, was sitting in her own palace, watching the scene of Jing Cheng wielding his sword. It was really too easy to cater to his liking. Not long after, the chief steward came in and said softly, "My imperial husband is very grateful for your majesty's reward," and even said something. What did he say? Tangguo asked. The chief steward smiled and said, "My imperial husband said that if your majesty has any orders, he will definitely do it well." Tangguo, system. Ha 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 ha, so he thought there was some errand for him to do. He completely didn't expect the host to be interested in that guy. I understand. Tell him that I will have something for him to do in the future. Yes, Your Majesty. In the following days, Tangguo didn't go to Jing Cheng. Jing Cheng was not disappointed. This was within his expectations. The Empress was actually not very close to anyone. She trusted him. As for Nan Yunchuan, it was probably because he was better at coaxing people. Su Qing knew how to play the zither and could make the Empress feel happy. As for the others, it was not so easy to please the Empress. When he entered the palace, his parents had told him to behave himself. If he had nothing to do, he should stay in the palace and practice his swordsmanship instead of fighting for favor. If the Empress needed him to do anything, he would do his best to cooperate with the Empress. He felt that his parents were really far-sighted. Waving the treasured sword that he loved so much, his heart was incomparably carefree. Her Majesty the Empress had bestowed him with such a powerful treasured sword, so he naturally had to work for her with all his heart. Dear host, congratulations on gaining a loyal subject. It had never thought that the host would experience something like this one day. Tangguo glanced at Jing Cheng's figure as he danced with the sword. I'm not angry at all. One day, he will have different thoughts about me. In the past 2 days, Nan Yunchuan and Su Qing had both left the palace. Of course, they had also met. Later, they met Tang Nuoyu. At that time, Tang Nuoyu happened to think of a way to turn herself into a normal person. In fact, Tang Nuoyu's way of recovering her intelligence was very simple. Chapter 882. Tang Nuoyu thought about it. Since there were so many schemes and tricks, it was better to be simple. It seemed to be full of loopholes, but in fact, it was the least likely to arouse suspicion. Therefore, she chose a time and hired a servant to secretly smash her head. When she woke up, she became smarter. Although it was unbelievable, this method was indeed not easy to arouse suspicion. Moreover, she had seen similar situations in unofficial history and some books. That day, she brought people and wore ordinary clothes. When she passed through a small alley, a flower pot suddenly fell from above and knocked her out. Although she was prepared, she had combed a thick hairstyle that day and cleverly dodged the flower pot the moment it fell. However, she still saw stars in her eyes, but because she was prepared, she was not seriously injured. When the people around her saw this situation, they hurriedly carried Tang Nuoyu into a nearby inn. This was because this place was really far from the Moon King's residence. Not long after, Tang Nuoyu woke up and began to become smarter. The people around her were all very surprised. Of course, more of them were happy. The group of people secretly returned to the residence. They did not know that this scene had already been seen by Nan Yunchuan, Su Qing, and the others. The fool has become good. Nan Yunchuan narrowed his eyes. Originally, I was thinking about how to proceed with this matter. Everyone, what do you think now? Everyone present was smart. Other than Nan Yunchuan and Su Qing, there was also Xiao Jin. At this time, Shan Ji and Yin Qiu had not joined forces with them yet. We still have to investigate the matter of the fool becoming smart. We have to see if she has just become smart or if she has been smart for a long time. We must be careful. Xiao Jin's scheming was the most profound. You guys are about to return to the palace, so it's definitely inconvenient to do these things. Let me go and test it out. Coincidentally, my identity is a hostage and I have no involvement with anyone else. If I appear by her side, it will not arouse anyone's suspicion. Of course, it's best if we can enter the Moon King's residence. That way, we can observe her closely. If there's no problem with her and it's really because this flower pot is not stupid, it'll be much easier to use. Xiao Jin's smile was sinister. The other two thought that this was a good idea and nodded. After that day, Xiao Jin used some means to get to know Tang Nuoyu. This was actually about the same time as the original development. Only God knew how long Tang Nuoyu had held herself back from killing Xiao Jin. She knew that Xiao Jin was a scheming person. She had to be careful when interacting with such a person. However, Xiao Jin did not suspect anything for someone who had died once and used all sorts of excuses to get away with it. She followed her original plan and didn't want to show how smart she was. If she was careful and did not reveal any flaws, Xiao Jin would suspect her. Therefore, her performance was similar to her previous life. Although Xiao Jin had many doubts in his heart, there was one thing he was certain of. Although this woman was normal, she was definitely not smart. To put it bluntly, he was stupid and easy to coax. With this idea in mind, Xiao Jin planned to make use of Tang Nuoyu. Little did he know that he had fallen into the hands of Tang Nuoyu. The two of them developed very quickly. After Tang Nuoyu woke up, the entire imperial city knew about it. Of course, Tang Guo would summon her into the palace to show her concern for her eldest sister. Tang Nuoyu was waiting for this day. Chapter 883. Tang Nuoyu was very excited. However, in order to prevent Xiao Jin from suspecting anything, she looked nervous. She grabbed Xiao Jin's arm hard and asked, "The Empress wants to see me. Is she trying to harm me?" Tang Nuoyu's nails were very long. Xiao Jin was in a lot of pain. But now he was acting as a man who was deeply in love with her. He endured the pain and patted her face. "Don't be afraid. If you're afraid, I'll go in with you, okay?" "Really?" Tang Nuoyu was a little happy. "Xiao Jin, you're really too kind. Then come in with me." Xiao Jin was also very happy. If he could enter the palace, he could contact the two of them. When the time came, they would discuss how to proceed to the next step. Tang Nuoyu laughed in her heart. There was no need to ask. This dog had such a deep expression. He must be scheming against her. Very well, then she would not be polite. The two of them entered the palace with their own thoughts. They were very excited. Tang Guo had asked the system to monitor Tang Nuoyu as early as after she became smart. When they entered the palace, she also watched the two of them's reactions. It had to be said that Tang Nuoyu had really learned her lesson. She performed very well and there were almost no flaws. She vividly portrayed a carefree, timid, naive, sweet girl who was not very smart. Tang Nuoyu grabbed Xiao Jin's arm hard. Xiao Jin endured it with a fake smile. He was once a prince. It was really humiliating to be treated like this. Although, this fool definitely did not know how much pain he was in now. With her stupid brain, she did not know how much pain she would cause him. So, how could he, Xiao Jin, fall in love with such a stupid woman? When he succeeded, he would kill her with his own hands. Tang Nuoyu chuckled in her heart. This dog's eyes were filled with ferocity. He must be thinking about how to kill her in the future. Haha, what a joke. If I were to be killed by you dogs in this life, then I would have been reborn for nothing. Tang Nuoyu was very excited to finally meet the legendary Empress, but she did not dare to show it. He expressed himself according to his performance in his previous life. "Moon King, we are very happy that you are able to recover." Tang Guo said, "Take good care of your body during this period of time. When your body recovers, we will be waiting for you to contribute to the West Saint Empire." Tang Nuoyu did not refuse and followed Xiao Jin's instructions. Xiao Jin was very satisfied. Tang Nuoyu was also very satisfied. In fact, Xiao Jin was really smart. It would be good to make use of him. "The person beside the Moon King, we find him familiar." Replying to Your Majesty, "This is the sixth prince of Qi, Xiao Jin." Tang Nuoyu answered honestly. She did not understand why the Empress would ask. In her previous life, the Empress did not pay attention to Xiao Jin. However, when she thought about it, there were many differences in their conversations. It was normal. "Does the Moon King like him very much?" Tang Guo asked expressionlessly, but there was some concern in her eyes. "Does the sixth prince also like the Moon King?" Tang Nuoyu did not understand, but still answered, "This subject likes him very much. I also like the Moon King very much." Xiao Jin quickly expressed his loyalty. He thought that the Empress was concerned about Tang Nuoyu and was afraid that he would cause trouble. Tang Guo nodded, "Since the two of you like each other, why not bring the sixth prince into the palace? With the sixth prince's status, he can be the Moon King's concubine." Tang Nuoyu, Can it be like this? Chapter 884. Xiao Jin, fuck your concubine. Thank you, Your Majesty. Tang Nuoyu finally reacted and revealed a sweet smile. Ha 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 ha, wasn't Xiao Jin high and mighty? He grew up in a male-dominated society and couldn't tolerate being married to a woman. But he was now infatuated with her, and she also acted like she liked him. Of course, she would happily agree to the Empress's proposal. They hadn't instilled in her the idea that the Empress might harm her. She just subconsciously thought that the Empress didn't like her, so she was afraid. But when the Empress wanted to help them marry, she was happy. Even if Xiao Jin was a prince of another country, he was just an abandoned prince who lost in a political battle. Being a concubine was already a favor for him. But Xiao Jin didn't think so. He was still waiting to borrow the power of West Saint Nation to turn things around for himself. Those people from the state of Qi had sent him here to humiliate him, because they knew that West Saint Nation was ruled by women. The men here were like the women of Qi, low in status. Men were married to women, and women could marry many men. Now that the Empress wanted to marry him, because of his situation, he had to obey. Originally, Tang Nuoyu didn't agree so readily. He might have a way to get away. But Tang Nuoyu agreed happily, so he could only accept it. Moon King is so happy, I am also very happy. The date of the marriage will be decided by Moon King himself. Yes, Your Majesty. Tang Nuoyu quickly bowed. The Empress was so good, so understanding of her thoughts. The Empress was really cute. She actually thought of marrying her. Although it might be a casual thing, she really wouldn't refuse. These men had schemed against her, and she really liked them. Starting over, she wanted revenge, but she wouldn't refuse to be close to them. Even sleeping next to each other, she felt pretty good. But she would not be moved again. Since she was in a country like the West Saint Empire, which was ruled by women, she might as well do as the Romans do and enjoy a world where women were respected. Tang Nuoyu thought to herself. She glanced at Xiao Jin, who had a dark expression on his face. Sixth Prince, are you dissatisfied? Tang Guo suddenly asked. Xiao Jin hurriedly revealed a smile. His heart was filled with hatred, but on the surface, he smiled and said, not at all. Xiao Jin is just very happy. I didn't expect that the Empress would grant me a marriage and that I would be able to be together with Prince openly. So that's how it is. The Moon King had just recovered, and the late Emperor had instructed us to take good care of the Moon King. The Moon King is this Emperor's older sister. She has lost a lot, so this Emperor naturally has to satisfy some of her small requests. Since both of you are in love with each other, this Emperor has to fulfill this beautiful matter. Tang Nuoyu's eyes lit up. Yes, they were sisters. Of course, they should care about each other. So cute. The Empress is her younger sister. However, they couldn't get too close right now. Xiao Jin would be suspicious, and the Empress would also be suspicious. She didn't want to have a falling out with her Empress sister and cause the other party to be dissatisfied. Moon King, now that you have recovered, is there anything else you want? This subject doesn't want anything. Tang Nuoyu glanced at Xiao Jin, a flash of shyness on her face. This subject is already very grateful to be able to receive the Empress's permission to marry me today. Xiao Jin was about to explode in anger. Then, have you thought of a good day? This subject will go back and look through it. Tang Nuoyu thought to herself. Of course, the sooner the better. Tang Guo nodded. When they left, Tang Nuoyu was very happy. In order not to be suspected, Xiao Jin could only smile and be happy with her. He didn't know how many times he cursed in his heart. Chapter 885. After leaving the palace, Tang Nuoyu grabbed Xiao Jin's arm and said happily, Xiao Jin, I'm so happy. I was worried that the Empress would stop us because of your identity. What should we do then? Now that the Empress has personally given the order, I don't have to worry so much. I can be with you happily. Xiao Jin was very frustrated, but he couldn't show it. After all, this was indeed something to be happy about given his current persona. Xiao Jin, I'll go back immediately and choose a good day to get things done. Xiao Jin put on a fake smile and was not happy at all. He cursed Tang Guo countless times in his heart. Why was that empress so troublesome? Because of this incident, he didn't get in touch with the two of them. Thinking of this, he was even angrier. Xiao Jin, you don't seem happy. Do you not want to marry me, or do you think it's unfair to be my concubine? Tang Nuoyu stopped smiling and looked lonely. If you don't want to, I'll go back and explain to the empress immediately. Xiao Jin quickly stopped her. No, you are misunderstood. I just feel that it's too surprising. Really? What else could Xiao Jin say? He hugged Tang Nuoyu and revealed a loving expression. He looked at her affectionately, and his voice was filled with boundless love. Of course, I'm happy to be with you. That's good. Tang Nuoyu lay in Xiao Jin's arms and smiled. In her lowered eyes, there was a calculation that Xiao Jin couldn't see. These men cheated her feelings and didn't hesitate to sacrifice their bodies. Every day, they pretended to love her deeply in front of her. She didn't know if they wanted to vomit. After Tang Nuoyu returned to the residence, she became busy as expected. The people assigned to her by the late emperor were absolutely loyal. If she was still a fool in the past, these people would definitely hesitate about her decision and think about whether it would bring her trouble. Now that the Moon King's brain had returned to normal, it meant that there would be endless possibilities in the future. Of course, they had never thought of harming the Empress. Instead, it was a Moon King with a normal brain. Compared to a Moon King who was an idiot, the difference in status and treatment was huge. In order to show that she valued Xiao Jin, Tang Nuoyu spread the news that she wanted to take in a secondary husband. The whole imperial city knew about it. Under her intentional spreading of the news quickly spread to the state of Qi. The people of the state of Qi were also shocked. Their sixth prince was actually willing to be a woman's concubine. This was truly shameful. Xiao Jin hadn't completely lost track of the state of Qi. When he heard this, he was furious. He also mentioned the other two men in Tang Nuoyu's mansion. One was her husband, Dan Ji, and the other was her husband, Yin Qiu. Ever since Tang Nuoyu's brain returned to normal, she hadn't met the two of them. They were very surprised by Tang Nuoyu's sudden recovery. At the same time, they were waiting to see how they would get along with this normal prince in the future. They completely didn't expect that the Moon King would take in a secondary husband before they even met. This time, the two of them had no choice but to meet Tang Nuoyu. When Tang Nuoyu saw the two men walking over, one was wearing a veil and the other was limping, she laughed hysterically in her heart. However, she put on a silly and sweet expression and asked her confidant, "Who are they?" Dan Ji was speechless. Yin Qiu was speechless. "Your Highness, the one wearing a veil is your husband, and the other is your husband, Yin Qiu." Chapter 886. Today's weather was good. After dealing with political affairs, Tang Guo wanted to go to the imperial garden to bask in the sun. Before the late emperor passed away, he did not leave her any mess and even solved many problems for her. As the empress, as long as there were no major problems, West Saint Country would not be in trouble. In her previous life, it was because Tang Nuoyu was too stupid that those people took advantage of the loophole. So, she was occasionally very free. Plus, she was not the real empress. She had been the empress several times, so it was easy for her to deal with those old foxes. Later, she thought that there were people who wanted to meet her in the imperial garden every day. Now she did not want to be entangled with those men. So, she went to Huangfu Jing Cheng's place. Where is Huangfu? Huangfu is practicing swordsmanship. Your Majesty, do you want to invite Huangfu over? No, Tang Guo waved her hand. I remember that there is a nice garden in Huangfu's palace, right? Yes. Then take me there. Everyone thought that Tang Guo was going to admire the flowers. They did not expect that she would ask someone to bring a lounge chair and sleep beside the flowers in the warm sun. The people around Tang Guo also looked at each other. When did Her Majesty become so careless? In their opinion, it was careless to sleep in a place other than the Empress's palace. They did not know that their Empress was no longer the original Empress. She dared to sleep in the sun like this because she had absolute confidence that she would be safe. Tang Guo was not sleeping either. It was the system that told her that there was a situation in Tang Nuoyu's residence. When she was watching, it was Tang Nuoyu's husband, Yin Qiu, who went to see the other party. The two of them had not recovered because they were badly beaten by Tang Nuoyu last time. When she heard Tang Nuoyu walk up to Mr. Wang and ask with a puzzled expression, "Mr. Wang, why are you wearing a veil?" the corners of Tangguo's lips curled up. Tang Nuoyu was very similar to her in one aspect, holding a grudge. Mr. Dongay was wearing a veil. He came to see Tang Nuoyu to sound her out, but he didn't expect that Tang Nuoyu would ask him why he was wearing a veil. Did she not know why he was wearing a veil? Shan Ji really didn't know how to answer. She couldn't say, "Your Highness, I was whipped by you." Before he could answer, Tang Nuoyu turned to Yin Qiu and asked curiously, "Why are you limping? Are you born with a bad leg?" Yin Qiu, "Fuck you, born with a bad leg." Dan Ji felt a little better. It seemed that His Highness did not remember what had happened before. Thinking back to that day when the whip hit his face, he couldn't bring himself to like the person in front of him. "Your Highness, we're here to congratulate Your Highness on taking in a secondary husband." Shan Ji made her intentions clear. Tang Nuoyu nodded. "So that's the case. All right, this prince understands." She pulled on Xiao Jin, who was feeling a little uncomfortable. "This is Xiao Jin, the sixth prince of the state of Qi. He will be this prince's concubine soon." Xiao Jin's expression was not very good. He hated it when people mentioned that he was the sixth prince of the state of Qi in the West Saint nation. "Xiao Jin, are you unhappy?" Tang Nuoyu pulled on Xiao Jin's arm, playing the role of a naive and sweet girl. "You don't have to care about them. This prince only likes you." She glanced at Shan Ji and Yin Qiu, then waved her hand. Chapter 887. You can leave now. Don't come to see me if there's nothing important. Shan Ji and Yin Qiu's expressions changed immediately. Even if they didn't like Tang Nuoyu didn't give them any face because of Xiao Jin. How could they still have a good impression of Xiao Jin? At that time, the two of them looked at Xiao Jin like knives. Xiao Jin also felt a headache. His initial plan was to infiltrate the Moon King's residence and ally with these two people around the Moon King. After all, he had investigated and found that these two people were very dissatisfied with the Moon King. It would be very easy to get them to defect to his side. Then, it would be perfectly justifiable for them to ally with the two people in the palace and use Tang Nuoyu's identity to fight against the Empress. He didn't expect that because of Tang Nuoyu's mental problems, she would leave a bad impression on him. If he wanted these two to believe him, he didn't know how much effort he would have to put in. Tang Nuoyu sensed Xiao Jin's thoughts and sneered in her heart. Live together harmoniously? Dream on. What she wanted was to sit in the residence and watch her husband fight. The more they fought, the happier she would be. She had learned all these from them. Then Shan Ji will take her leave. Yin Qiu will also take her leave. Before the two of them left, they didn't forget to glance coldly at Xiao Jin, which made Xiao Jin's head hurt. After they left, Tang Nuoyu hugged Xiao Jin's arm and smiled happily. "Xiao Jin, don't worry. I won't like them. I like you the most." Xiao Jin took a deep breath and touched Tang Nuoyu's cheek. Okay. He was worried. What should he do next? Shan Ji and Yin Qiu were very hostile towards him. It seemed that he still had to use Tang Nuoyu's identity to enter the palace and discuss with the two of them. Tangguo saw that there would be nothing fun here, so she closed her eyes and fell asleep. With the help of the system, there shouldn't be any problems. Moreover, she believed that there wouldn't be any problems in her husband's palace. It was only after Jing Cheng finished practicing his sword that he learned that the Empress had come. He put away his sword and asked, "Why didn't you report earlier?" "It was His Majesty who ordered us not to disturb the imperial husband's sword practice." Jing Cheng immediately recalled the brilliant smile the Empress had given him. His heart skipped a beat for no reason. He took the sword into the room and quickly took a bath. After changing into clean clothes, he was led to the garden by the palace servants. When he walked into the garden, he saw the woman with her eyes closed beside the flowers. At that moment, he stopped in his tracks. When he came back to his senses, he walked over quietly without making a sound, as if he was afraid of waking up the person who was sleeping. "Your Majesty." A palace servant saw him and wanted to salute him, but he quickly raised his hand to stop them. The palace servant didn't want to disturb Tang Guo, so he only bowed and didn't say anything else. Jing Cheng sat quietly on the stone bench. He originally wanted to look at the flowers in the garden, but as he looked, he couldn't help but look at the person beside the flowers. He was entranced. She looked like she was sleeping, and the corners of her lips were raised. She was obviously having a beautiful dream. The Empress in her sleep was really quiet and looked very harmless. He couldn't help but think of how she was serious in front of others, but smiling in front of him. So, which side was the real Empress? He took a sip of tea, but his gaze still didn't move away. At that moment, Tang Guo opened her eyes, and he was so shocked that he almost dropped the teacup. Fortunately, his martial arts were good, and he quickly caught it. But he saw that there was some confusion in those beautiful eyes, and there were even some tears. The way she looked at him was very confused. She probably didn't notice that he was looking at her attentively. Chapter 888. Jing Cheng had just breathed a sigh of relief when he heard Tang Guo say, "Imperial husband." "Yes." He hurriedly answered and put the teacup aside. Hearing that soft voice, his heart felt like it was scratched by a cat. He didn't look at the Empress's face. He didn't know when, but his attention was easily attracted to her. "Help me up." Hearing this, Jing Cheng's heart was complicated, but he still went up and helped her up. The Empress's body was very fragrant, really very fragrant. It wasn't that he was imagining things, but that he subconsciously thought so. The Empress was still a bit thin. When he helped her up, he felt like he was touching her bones. He remembered that she had to wake up before dawn to attend court, and after court, she still had to approve memorials. Although she still had some free time every day, she wasn't as free as the men in the harem. If something happened somewhere, she basically wouldn't have time to rest for a month. She was only 15 years old, and still an underage girl. Thinking about it, Jing Cheng felt some pity, and couldn't help but feel that the Empress was a bit pitiful. It really wasn't easy to manage such a big country at such a young age. It was said that the late Emperor's health wasn't good, and the Empress's sister Tang Nuoyu was born a fool. The birth of the Empress represented the future of the entire West Saint Empire. She was raised as the heir since young, and basically didn't have any happy childhood. "Imperial husband, are you done practicing?" "Yes." Jing Cheng hurriedly answered. He felt that the Empress's voice was a bit soft. Of course, he thought it was an auditory hallucination. "Have you eaten? Practicing will consume a lot of energy, you must eat more." Maybe she just said it casually, but Jing Cheng was still a bit happy. "I haven't had time. Head steward, go bring some food, according to Imperial husband's taste. Next time, if Imperial husband practices, prepare the food first, so he doesn't starve." Tang Guo waved her hand. A series of orders made Jing Cheng's heart feel strange. The Empress was too concerned about him. He had to say, after being in the palace for so many years, he was still a bit happy to be cared for by the Empress. He was the Empress's husband, and it was best if he could get along with her. Currently, their relationship was really good. Of course, he didn't expect the Empress to like him that much. On the day he became the Imperial husband, he understood that in the future, he might not be like his parents, having a simple love. However, it was still not bad to be able to support and live in harmony with the Empress. No matter what, he was still a man. His manly nature did not disappear just because he was in the West Saint nation. He wouldn't die just because he couldn't obtain the Empress's devoted love. At most, he would be a little disappointed. Soon, the food was brought over. Tang Guo propped up her chin and looked at the motionless Jing Cheng with a smile. "Imperial hubby, eat. You've just finished practicing and need to replenish your food. You don't have to be polite in front of me." Jing Cheng recalled that he had revealed his true colors in front of the Empress the last time, so he decided not to pretend anymore. Then Jing Cheng won't stand on ceremony. He was indeed a little hungry. The Empress was so generous that she didn't mind him eating a lot at all. His impression of the Empress was also getting better and better. He thought that with such an Empress ruling over the West Saint Nation, the West Saint Nation would definitely get better and better. Of course, he would also do his best to help the Empress and be loyal to her forever. He would never betray the Empress, otherwise he would be letting down her good intentions. He thought of the men in the harem, and felt some pity for the Empress. Chapter 889. System. Ha 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 ha. Host, looking at your appearance, Imperial husband is really loyal. No matter how good you are to him, he will still think about how to be loyal to you. Host, do you have any thoughts now? Tangguer, actually, it's not wrong for a man to be reserved sometimes. If he likes someone the moment he comes, isn't that a bit too hasty? He has no memories and hasn't spent much time with me. Isn't it normal that he doesn't have any thoughts about me now? System, okay, he understands. The host always has many reasons that he can't refute. Jing Cheng swept away all the food on the table. After eating, he habitually felt awkward. Then, he saw that the Empress didn't look at him differently. Instead, she was still smiling. Imperial husband, is the usual food enough? Why don't I get someone to add some more for you? It's enough. Jing Cheng quickly replied. He really wasn't hungry. The food was enough for him to eat. Even if it wasn't enough, he had a small kitchen in the palace. He could ask someone to make some for him. That's good. Tangguer nodded and asked, how many years has it been since Imperial husband entered the palace? The late Emperor's health was not good, so he settled Jing Cheng early on. After passing the throne to the original owner, Jing Cheng entered the palace. Counting the time, it had been 4 or 5 years. 5 years. Then you haven't been home, right? Speaking of home, Jing Cheng also missed it and nodded honestly. No. He was still a little envious of Nan Yunchuan and Su Qing. These two had just been allowed to return home a while ago. It could be seen that it was still useful to gain the Empress's favor. Pick a time, I'll accompany you back. Jing Cheng, I almost threw the bowl away. Was the Empress serious? Tangguer's beautiful eyes were fixed on Jing Cheng's face. Imperial husband? Are you surprised? It's a surprise. Jing Cheng was excited. Of course, it was a good thing to be able to go home. However, the Empress wanted to personally accompany him back. This wasn't good, right? Then when do you think it's good? I'm not too busy with political affairs recently, so I can accompany you back at any time. Jing Cheng calmed down. The Empress planned to personally accompany him home. Wasn't it a little too ostentatious? So he said, why don't you let Jing Cheng go back by himself? Of course, he didn't want to miss the opportunity to visit his family. Perhaps this would be the only time in his life. Although he was the imperial husband and could summon his father every month, this was different from going home in person. How can that be? You are the imperial husband. This is your first time returning home, so you must be accompanied by Zhen, Tangguer said with a smile. Zhen will be an adult soon, so it's time for Zhen to accompany imperial husband back home. Speaking of adulthood, Jing Cheng had a lot of thoughts in his mind. Now that the Empress had reached adulthood, it meant that she would begin to visit the harem. No wonder the Empress had been paying more attention to him recently. It turned out that what the Empress wanted him to do was to accompany her in giving birth to her child. He hadn't guessed wrong, had he? After all, the successor of the Empress was very important. As he thought about it, Jing Cheng's ears turned red. He did have to cooperate when it came to giving birth to a child. However, the Empress's lack of clarity had almost caused him to misunderstand. Then the day after tomorrow. I wonder if Your Majesty has the time? He was very clear about his own status. Since the Empress had praised him, he naturally had to be tactful. In the future, if the Empress really had his child, he would definitely protect the child while he was in the palace. He would not withdraw from anything that should not be withdrawn. Chapter 890. I'm very curious. His ears are so red. What is he thinking about? Tangguer communicated with the system, This fellow's old habits can't be changed. System, hehe, isn't it all because of you? The day after tomorrow, we have time. Head steward, go and pick some things. When you accompany imperial husband home, bring them along. Tang Guo didn't stay for long at Jing Cheng's place because the palace servant reported that Nan Yunchuan wanted to see her. Thinking of such a person, she decided to go and see him. Seeing that Jing Cheng's smile had disappeared, she laughed in her heart and stood up. She was about to walk out, but she walked to Jing Cheng's side. Jing Cheng didn't quite understand. In fact, he did feel a little uncomfortable in his heart. The Empress was really outstanding, but she was the Empress. It was impossible for him to have her alone. Imperial husband. Your Majesty, if you are busy, you can go. Jing Cheng sighed in his heart. If the Empress continued to treat him well, he really couldn't help but like her very much. Tang Guo pulled Jing Cheng's sleeve. Imperial husband, why are you suddenly unhappy? Your Majesty, is it because I want to see Nan Yunchuan? Jing Cheng was speechless. If he didn't admit it, he would be lying to the monarch. If he admitted it, he would be jealous. For a moment, he really didn't know what to say. Imperial husband, you don't have to care. We only care about you. Tang Guo raised her chin and looked at Jing Cheng's face. She said seriously, Imperial husband, you will understand in the future. She let go of Jing Cheng's sleeve. Don't be unhappy. If there is a good sword manual, we will ask someone to send it to you. After saying that, Tang Guo left. The moment Jing Cheng was pulled by the Empress, his heart was beating fast. At that time, he had an impulse to pull her into his embrace. In the end, he restrained himself because she was the Empress. Thinking of this, Jing Cheng was a little annoyed. The Empress's words to him made the discomfort in his heart dissipate. So, was the Empress explaining to him why she wanted to go to Nan Yunchuan? It wasn't because she cared about Nan Yunchuan, but because of other reasons. Thinking of this, Jing Cheng was a little inconceivable. It was getting harder and harder to understand the Empress's thoughts. Imperial husband, do you want to continue practicing the sword? Everyone in Jing Cheng Palace knew Jing Cheng's habits. As long as he had nothing to do, he would practice his sword. Now that the Empress had already left, according to the imperial husband's personality, he would definitely be engrossed in practicing the sword again. But this time, Jing Cheng waved his hand. I'm not practicing anymore. Jing Cheng suddenly recalled the scene he had seen in the garden and said, let's paint today. The scene in his mind couldn't be erased no matter how hard he tried. He really wanted to draw it. The eunuch didn't understand, but still did as Jing Cheng said. On this side, Tang Guo left the palace in the capital. Not long after, she saw Nan Yunchuan waiting in the imperial garden. Your Majesty. When Nan Yunchuan saw Tang Guo, he immediately cupped his hands and bowed. When Tang Guo called out to him, he stood up straight. His peach blossom eyes were focused on Tang Guo. He hesitated for a moment before asking, Your Majesty, did you go to the imperial husband's side just now? Tang Guo replied. Yunchuan, why are you looking for Zhen? When Nan Yunchuan saw the faint smile on the corner of Tang Guo's mouth, he felt much more at ease. Yunchuan is here to thank your Majesty. Thank your Majesty for letting Yunchuan go home to visit his family. Tang Guo nodded. How is your father? He's already much better. Thank you for your concern, your Majesty. Nan Yunchuan paused and said, last time, I heard that your Majesty likes flower tea, so Yunchuan prepared a lot. Chapter 891. I wonder if your Majesty is free today? Of course, Tang Guo wouldn't answer that she wasn't free and followed Nan Yunchuan to his palace. Looking at Nan Yunchuan's smooth and flowing flower tea, her expression didn't change much. Only the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. She wasn't as relaxed as she was in Jing Cheng Palace. The chief steward who had followed her since she was young had long discovered that Her Majesty treated the imperial husband differently. He wasn't sure before, but now he understood very clearly that the only person Her Majesty cared about was the imperial husband. After drinking Nan Yunchuan's flower tea, Tang Guo praised him a few times and rewarded him with many things. After saying some words of concern, as usual, She was ready to leave. Nan Yunchuan quickly said, "If your majesty wants to drink flower tea in the future, you might as well come to Yunchuan." "Okay." Tang Guo turned around with a smile on her face. Yunchuan's tea skills are indeed not bad. "By the way, I'll allow you to return home once a month, how about it?" Nan Yunchuan couldn't believe it at all and looked at Tang Guo in shock. Seeing Tang Guo's beautiful eyes staring at him, his heart couldn't help but skip a beat. Was he about to get the Empress's heart? Thinking of this, his heartbeat couldn't be controlled. At that moment, his heart really beat for the young woman in front of him. But he quickly reacted. The person he was going to overthrow in the future was the Empress in front of him. His goal was to gain her trust. Of course, it would be best if he could get her sincerity. As long as he could get the Empress's sincerity, it would be easy for him to do anything. If the Empress allowed him to return home to visit his family once a month, he would be able to do a lot of things. He still refused. Of course, Tang Guo wouldn't let him refuse. In the end, Nan Yunchuan happily agreed. From that day on, Tang Guo would be invited by Nan Yunchuan almost every day. Occasionally, Su Qing would appear to show her face. But all the men in the harem knew that Her Majesty the Empress doted on Nan Yunchuan the most. Some time ago, the Empress accompanied the imperial husband home. They thought that the Empress doted on the imperial husband the most. After returning to the palace, the Empress didn't often go to see the imperial husband. Every day, she would go to Nan Yunchuan's place to sit for a while. They understood that the Empress was at most respectful to the imperial husband. As for Nan Yunchuan, it was true love. If you continue like this, the Empress will definitely trust you, and it will be much easier for us to do things. Su Qing changed her usual sad look. Her cold eyes were full of calculations. When she saw that Nan Yunchuan was distracted, she couldn't help but pat the table. "Yunchuan, what's wrong?" Nan Yunchuan came back to his senses. He had merely thought of the days he had spent with the Empress recently. The Empress had indeed treated him very well. He felt a little regretful in his heart. If the Empress had not been the Empress, perhaps he would have been able to survive. Su Qing immediately saw through Nan Yunchuan's thoughts and warned, "Brother Yunchuan, don't lose your heart. Don't forget, she is the Empress of the West Saint Empire. If he treats you well today, he might treat someone else well tomorrow. Don't tell me you're willing to stay in the harem forever just because she's good to you, so that the men of the West Saint Empire will never have a chance to rise again." "I understand." Nan Yunchuan put away what he shouldn't have thought about before. Su Qing still reminded him, "It's good that you understand. Don't give up our ideals just because the Empress is gentle to you." Got it? Chapter 892. Tang Guo, who was in the palace, heard the conversation between the two men and laughed. This Su Qing, her mind is really clear. Tang Guo lowered her eyes. However, how many people can really be clear-headed all the time? The system trembled in the corner and did not dare to interrupt. However, they are indeed very courageous. The thinking of women and men is indeed so different. Most women, from their point of view, like to do most of the things they like to do is to please the emperor. Men, on the other hand, are thinking of ways to overthrow this country ruled by women. Actually, we just have different standpoints. But since I am here, they are destined to lose. The system deeply agreed. It was indeed different standpoints. It could still understand this point. These men, for their own purposes, did not hesitate to sacrifice their looks and put down their dignity to please women. They were indeed very courageous. "Host, what are you going to do next?" "I don't have any ideas. The West Holy Empire is very stable. As long as I don't lose my mind, they won't be able to make any trouble. Recently, I will try my best to treat them better." Tang Guo narrowed her eyes. In the future, they will miss the days in the palace. These two people had already planned to meet Xiao Jin outside the palace every month. It was estimated that they would also meet Tang Nuoyu. If the host did not intervene, they would curry favor with Tang Nuoyu like in her previous life. Moreover, they would inform Tang Nuoyu that the host was going to harm her. "Let them go." Tang Guo did not care what these people wanted to do next, but she was still curious about Tang Nuoyu's next reaction. When they leave the palace, they will go see my imperial husband. It had been a few days since she saw Jing Cheng. She did not know how that guy was doing. At this time, Jing Cheng had already returned from his sword practice. Looking at the sleeping beauty hanging on the wall, a smile unconsciously appeared on his face. Imperial husband, should we invite His Majesty over? As people around Jing Cheng, how could they not know that their imperial husband was interested in His Majesty? But recently, His Majesty had not come to the imperial husband's place, and they were very anxious. Seeing that His Majesty was about to reach adulthood, if he was bewitched by Nan Yunchuan, Su Qing, and the others, where would their imperial husband's position in the palace be? Jing Cheng glanced at the people around him and said, "No need." He had already observed that His Majesty was not sincere to those two people. As for how to observe, of course, when no one was paying attention, he secretly used his Qinggong to fly to the fake mountains, roofs, and other corners. He had seen with his own eyes that His Majesty did not show a very happy smile in front of Nan Yunchuan and the others. She would not be able to sleep peacefully like she did at his place. Only in front of him would she smile and not hide her thoughts at all. Therefore, the person His Majesty cared about was him. The corners of Jing Cheng's mouth curled up. He didn't care much about Tang Guo going to other palaces. On this day, Tang Guo was invited by Nan Yunchuan again. Just as she was chatting happily with Nan Yunchuan, she suddenly glanced at the corner and met Jing Cheng's gaze. Jing Cheng was seen by her, but he had no intention of hiding. Of course, he had no intention of walking out. She smiled at him and had no intention of calling him out. When Nan Yunchuan realized that something was wrong, Tang Guo's smile was still gone, and Jing Cheng was not in his original position. "What's wrong with His Majesty?" Tang Guo shook her head. "Nothing." Nan Yunchuan was suspicious. He felt that His Majesty must have seen something just now. Chapter 893. Imperial Husband, Her Majesty has already seen you. Why don't you go over? Jing Cheng walked quickly to his palace and said in a good mood, "Since I've seen her, there's no need to go over. Go back to the palace to practice the sword." The palace people were puzzled and couldn't help but mutter in their hearts. "Imperial husband, if you continue like this, you will completely lose Her Majesty the Empress." Nan Yunchuan clearly felt that Tang Guo's mood had improved a lot. After observing for a while, he did not see anyone else. He thought that it was because the Empress felt that it was very pleasant to get along with him. "Your Majesty, tomorrow is the time when Yunchuan returns home once a month." "Oh, so it's like that." Tang Guo paused. "Later, I'll ask the General Steward to bring you to pick some ginseng herbs for your father." "Thank you, Your Majesty." Nan Yunchuan was sincerely grateful. These days, the Empress had indeed treated him very well. "Is there anything Your Majesty wants?" "When Yunchuan returns, I'll bring it to Your Majesty." Tang Guo shook her head. "I don't want anything." "Then Yunchuan will buy it as he sees fit. When the time comes, Your Majesty, please don't dislike it." Tang Guo smiled faintly. "No matter what Yunchuan gives me, I won't dislike it." Her gaze fell on Nan Yunchuan's face. Perhaps it was a guilty conscience, but Nan Yunchuan did not dare to look directly at her. The hands hidden in his sleeves clenched into fists. If the Empress was not the Empress, he might really be tempted by her and spend the rest of his life with her. Unfortunately, why was she the Empress? No matter how good she was to him, their positions were different. "Then when Yunchuan returns, I'll make flower tea for Your Majesty." Tang Guo nodded. "All right, then I'll wait." The next day, Su Qing and Nan Yunchuan returned home together. The men in the palace, except for Jing Cheng, all gritted their teeth in hatred towards the two of them. Not only did these two gain the favor of Her Majesty, but they also received the benefits of returning home once a month. They were really scheming. The men in the palace could not sit still anymore, so they came to find Jing Cheng. However, Jing Cheng had already expected it. The palace gates were closed, and they could not see anyone. They wanted to see the Empress, but they were not Su Qing and Nan Yunchuan. The Empress would not see them at all. And their empress, after Su Qing and Nan Yunchuan returned home, sneaked into Jing Cheng's palace. At that time, Jing Cheng was practicing his sword. Tang Guo still didn't disturb Jing Cheng. She just stood by the side and watched the handsome man who was dancing with his sword. In this harem, other than Su Qing and Nan Yunchuan, the only normal man was probably Jing Cheng. When Jing Cheng finished practicing, he realized that Tang Guo had arrived at some point. He hurriedly walked in front of her and was about to bow. Imperial husband, there's no need to stand on ceremony. Tang Guo's arrival made Jing Cheng somewhat happy. Would your majesty like some tea? If it's personally brewed by his majesty, I will drink it. Jing Cheng subconsciously said, could it be that your majesty doesn't like the tea brewed by Nan Yunchuan? Tang Guo's face was full of smiles. Imperial husband's tea is still the best. I like it the most. Then I'll go right away. Jing Cheng held his sword and walked quickly. If he didn't leave now, he was afraid that the empress would see his red ears clearly. That would be a bit embarrassing. Jing Cheng quickly washed up and finally came over with a tea set. He began to make tea for Tang Guo. During this time, he felt Tang Guo's gaze. His hands trembled and he almost spilled the tea. Tang Guo supported her chin with one hand and looked straight at Jing Cheng. Why aren't you curious? Why did I treat Nan Yunchuan and Su Qing like that? Chapter 894. They were even allowed to return home once a month. On the contrary, you, the imperial husband, did not receive such treatment. Imperial husband, do you feel uncomfortable in your heart? Jing Cheng quickly replied, no. The empress had already made it obvious enough. He was not a person who liked to be jealous. Just based on the fact that the empress had said these words in front of him without hiding anything, it could prove that the other party really cared about him. Moreover, no one knew that the empress looked especially good when she smiled, and even took an afternoon nap in his palace without any precaution. It could be seen that the empress trusted him. How the empress treated Nan Yunchuan and Su Qing, she must have her own motives. It seems that imperial husband doesn't care about me. If you don't care about a person, you won't feel uncomfortable about these things. No, Jing Cheng quickly said, afraid of being misunderstood. His face was still a little apprehensive. When he met Tang Guo's gaze, he was speechless for a moment. Tang Guo raised her eyebrows and asked, then why? Jing Cheng, the empress is so unreasonable. Could it be that she doesn't only show it in front of him? Is she treating him differently? How your majesty does things must have your majesty's own intentions. Jing Cheng just understands, it's not that I don't care about your majesty. So, do you care about this emperor? Tang Guo asked, unwilling to let him go. What else could Jing Cheng do? He could only bite the bullet and nod. He had to admit that he did like the empress. This empress, who was a few years younger than him, pretended to be mature in front of others, but revealed her true colors in front of him. Then I am very happy. Tang Guo picked up her teacup and took a sip of the flower tea. As expected, it's the imperial husband's flower tea. It's my favorite. System, that's because of the imperial husband. Jing Cheng's mouth also revealed a smile. The empress was straightforward in front of him, how could he not like her? Actually, I don't have too many thoughts about Nan Yunchuan and Su Qing. Tang Guo put down her teacup and said indifferently, it's just that they always have various ways to appear in front of me. They clearly don't have me in their eyes, but they have to pretend to be affectionate. I'm just curious, what are they going to do? Jing Cheng was shocked. Was the empress confiding in him? I later found out that they especially liked to leave the palace. I'll just let them out and see what they're up to. Jing Cheng's heart skipped a beat and he asked, did your majesty see it? Not yet, but we should be able to see it soon. Jing Cheng took a deep breath. What do you need me to do, your majesty? You don't need to do anything, Tang Guo smiled, you just need to stay in the palace. If you want to go out of the palace to play, Jin will take you with me when Jin is free. Jing Cheng, your majesty, aren't you being a little too straightforward? I'm flattered. I want to take a nap. Before Jing Cheng could react, Tang Guo was already lying on top of him. He looked at the girl in his arms helplessly, his heart pounding. He did not intend to push her away. He was afraid that this position would be uncomfortable, so he even helped her move. Although he had thought about hugging the Empress many times in his mind, it was still very different when he actually interacted with her. Looking at her tightly shut eyes, Jing Cheng laughed silently and put his hands on her body. The Empress had already treated him like this, so of course he would not let her down. Tang Guo did not fall asleep, but was observing Su Qing and Nan Yunchuan. Chapter 895. As expected, the two of them met Tang Nuoyu. Tang Nuoyu knew that the two of them were coming to find her, so she deliberately didn't bring Xiao Jin and went out to play alone. When Su Qing and Nan Yunchuan saw Tang Nuoyu, they created an opportunity and the three of them met by chance. Between the two of them, they were full of praise and appreciation for Tang Nuoyu. Tang Nuoyu's performance was no different from her previous life. The two of them quickly became familiar with Tang Nuoyu. Later, Xiao Jin still found out about their plans. He didn't mind the two of them getting close to Tang Nuoyu. Every time they came out, the place where the three of them gathered was always at Tang Nuoyu's residence. They had been looking for opportunities to turn Tang Nuoyu's husband, Dan Ji, and her husband, Yin Qiu, to their side. But every time, because of Tang Nuoyu, something out of their control would happen. For example, whenever Dan Ji and Yin Qiu appeared, they would always look at them with disgust. They didn't mind. They only hoped that they could have more power on their side to coax Tang Nuoyu together. However, every time the two of them made expressions of disgust towards them, they would be seen by Tang Nuoyu. What? This king is not allowed to see the two of them? Tang Nuoyu frowned. My husband, are you so intolerant of this king liking others? How can you be so jealous? How can you be worthy of being this king's husband? Dan Ji felt extremely wronged in his heart, and he was even more disgusted with Xiao Jin and the other two. He had become Tang Nuoyu's husband a long time ago, so he didn't know that Su Qing and Nan Yunchuan were from the palace. He only thought that these two people wanted to climb up the ladder of riches and honor. He despised and hated them in his heart. These two people were known to Tang Nuoyu outside. With Xiao Jin, who had a high status, their status was already in danger. They had to be on guard against two equally outstanding men. Forget about the king's husband, Yin Qiu, you're just a little servant. How dare you control this king? Yin Qiu's face was pale. He pursed his lips and knelt down. It's Yin Qiu's fault. Please forgive me, Your Highness. Tang Nuoyu looked at Yin Qiu, who was so humble, and couldn't help but think of the Yin Qiu, who was so arrogant and kicked her on the night before she died. Yes, even if she died, she would be humiliated. It's good that you know your mistake. You have to remember your identity. You're just this prince's servant. Even if you're this prince's husband, you can't control this prince. If you, the moon, this king, the moon king, this king's mansion, this king, the moon, this moon's residence, if you, this king, this. These words really scared Yin Qiu. He had once been sent to the Moon King's residence as a gift. Once the Moon King didn't want him, he would end up in a miserable state. Your Highness, Yin Qiu won't dare to do it again. Shan Ji wanted to say something, but he suddenly remembered the whip from before. Even if the king was a fool at that time, they were not easy to bully. Looking at Yin Qiu, who was about to collapse on the ground, he quickly shut his mouth and stopped interrupting. After Shan Ji and Yin Qiu left, Tang Nuoyu quickly revealed a little girl's attitude. At present, she, Su Qing, and Nan Yunchuan were innocent and only got along as friends. Therefore, she had to explain to the two of them. Su Qing, Yunchuan, don't misunderstand. They are too unreasonable. This king has made two friends, but you have to care. This king suspects that the Empress really wants to harm this king like you said. These two people are very likely to be the Empress's people. Chapter 896. As soon as she said this, Su Qing and Nan Yunchuan looked at each other. Even Xiao Jin felt a headache coming on. Sometimes, it was not that easy to plot against a fool. Who knew what this fool's brain was like? Now, they couldn't rope in Yin Qiu and Shan Ji because they had just told Tang Nuoyu that the Empress might harm her. Tang Nuoyu now suspected that Yin Qiu and Shan Ji were the Empress's people. Without evidence to prove their innocence, their involvement with the two of them would only make Tang Nuoyu misunderstand. Just thinking about it gave them a headache. This time, they left the palace to make Tang Nuoyu suspect that the Empress would harm her. Of course, in order to make things go smoothly and make Tang Nuoyu trust them wholeheartedly, they would arrange a lot of things so that Tang Nuoyu would only trust them. But today, forget it. The few of them looked at each other. In the end, Su Qing and Nan Yunchuan said goodbye to Tang Nuoyu and left. Tang Guo and the system both watched this scene. They were silent for a moment, and it was Tang Guo who asked, "Tongzi, do you feel like you've seen this scene somewhere before?" Now that the host said it, I also feel that it's very similar. Do you remember? I remember, the host, isn't this the prince's novel that we read in the early years? It's a very trashy prince's novel, but this time, it's a queen. Tang Guo nodded. She also remembered. This Tang Nuoyu seemed to want to walk the path of a trashy prince. The two did not continue speaking because they saw that Tang Nuoyu had actually gone to Shan Ji's room. Host, what is this Moon King planning to do? Tang Guo also shook her head. At first, she thought that Tang Nuoyu was planning to take revenge with hatred. But later on, Tang Nuoyu was actually able to endure and get along with these men peacefully. Not only did she get along peacefully, but she also did not reject their ambiguous relationship. He had married Xiao Jin and even shared a room with Xiao Jin. There seemed to be nothing to be dissatisfied with. She was just like a real princess who doted on her husband. Tang Nuoyu knew the purpose of Su Qing and Nan Yunchuan's appearance, but she did not refuse and even followed the original script. She was very curious about what Tang Nuoyu was going to do. Now, Tang Nuoyu actually came to Dan Ji's room after the others left. It was really interesting. Wang Fu, I've made you suffer today. Shan Ji was indeed very sad. Her life was not good. A long time ago, she had been forced to marry the foolish prince of the West Saint Nation and had been mocked by many people. Recently, he had been extremely aggrieved. But what could he do? Tang Nuoyu was the prince of West Saint Country, he couldn't resist. What are you talking about, Your Highness? You were right. Shan Ji shouldn't appear outside and disturb Your Highness. Tang Nuoyu sighed and walked to Shan Ji's side. She tugged at his sleeve. Wang Fu. Shan Ji was a little shocked. What was the prince doing? Tang Nuoyu looked aggrieved. This prince didn't want to treat you like that. This prince did this because I had no choice. Shan Ji was suspicious, but she wanted to hear Tang Nuoyu's explanation. This prince suspects that they have other motives for approaching this prince. Shan Ji was shocked. Why does Your Highness think so? Tang Nuoyu hurriedly pulled Shan Ji to sit down and told her about what happened to Su Qing and Nan Yunchuan. Shan Ji was actually a very smart man. When she heard Tang Nuoyu's description, she felt that this matter was a bit coincidental. Chapter 897. They also told me that the Empress wanted to harm me. I don't even know who wants to harm me now. So, Your Highness. Tang Nuoyu looked calm. I was just acting for them. I wanted them to think that I didn't trust anyone. Because of my bad relationship with you, I could only trust them in the end. Dan Ji's heart skipped a beat. Then what do you think is going on? Could they be sent by the Empress? If they were really sent by the Empress, do you think the Empress would make it so obvious? Dan Ji thought that he was right. If they were really sent by the Empress, how could they be discovered so easily by the prince? I suspect that they are here to sow discord between the Empress and me. It's a big conspiracy, Tang Nuoyu said in a low voice. I also suspect something else. What is it? Dan Ji felt that perhaps Tang Nuoyu was not that stupid. The reason why Tang Nuoyu said this to Dan Ji was that Dan Ji was the least rebellious among these men. Dan Ji was born in an environment that made him a person who was content with the status quo. As long as he was given enough assurance, he would definitely choose the side that was most beneficial to him. Back then, it was because those men controlled her and schemed against the Empress that Dan Ji had no choice but to join them. Xiao Jin. I also suspect that he has other motives. This time, Dan Ji was really shocked. She said subconsciously, "Don't you like him, Your Highness?" "I do like him." Tang Nuoyu looked very pained. "But I always feel that his heart is not here, so I can't help but suspect that he used to be the 6th prince of the state of Qi. The men there are very noble. I think that he might not be willing to be a member of my harem. Your Highness is so good to him. What else does he want?" Dan Ji said, vaguely feeling indignant for Tang Nuoyu. Tang Nuoyu smiled in her heart. If Dan Ji only listened to her in the future, she could let Dan Ji live a glorious life for the rest of her life. The prerequisite was that he was not allowed to betray her this time. Compared to me being nice to him, I'm afraid he'd prefer to go back to the kingdom of Qi to be the emperor. Tang Nuoyu's face was filled with loneliness. If it was in her previous life, she would not have bothered to act. After being killed once, she had already learned these things. Sometimes, sincerity might not be exchanged for sincerity. Perhaps some hypocritical words could be exchanged for greater gains. She didn't know how to describe such a thing. She only knew that this was the only way she could live comfortably in this life and not be schemed to death. "So, husband, can you understand me?" Tang Nuoyu held Dan Ji's hand and touched her face. There was a very shallow scar. "This prince was stupid in the past and accidentally hurt you. Today, this prince had no choice but to put on an act and said harsh words. Prince, what are you doing? This prince only wants to tell you that you will always be this prince's husband. This prince is currently in a dangerous situation. If you are willing to stay by this prince's side, you will always be my husband. If you are unwilling, this prince can secretly send you out and let you live a free life." This was the first time Dan Ji had been treated so sincerely. She was a bit moved and thought of his own situation. Dan Ji doesn't have a free life. If Your Highness is willing, Dan Ji can always stand by Your Highness's side. Actually, she had thought a lot. Perhaps she could take a gamble. If she took a gamble, she would gain glory, splendor, wealth, and the prince's favor. If she lost, she could just go back to the past. Chapter 898. Tang Guo watched everything about Tang Nuoyu and was amazed. "Host, did you see that? Tang Nuoyu is much more open than you. She was simply able to bend and stretch as needed. No matter how good or how to say it, that Dan Ji had already been coaxed by her. Probably now, he wouldn't listen to anyone. Host, learn a little." The system couldn't help but blindly say, "Hurry up and do something to your imperial husband. You're too reasonable." Tang Guo almost spat out. She thought that the system wanted her to learn how Tang Nuoyu coaxed people. She didn't expect that the system would be completely crooked. It actually wanted her to push down the imperial husband. "Tongzi, you've become bad." "Host, I'm telling the truth. Look at Tang Nuoyu, Xiao Jin has become her person, and now Dan Ji is also willing to become her person. I reckon that Yin Qiu will also bow down before long. As for Nan Yunchuan and Su Qing, in order to achieve their goal, they will definitely be together with Tang Nuoyu. However, now that Tang Nuoyu wants to hug the host's thigh, she will definitely not get involved with the two of them, which is a little less fun." Tang Guo narrowed her eyes. "Then I'll give them a chance. I don't care about these two men. Tang Nuoyu likes to play so much, I'll just do as she wishes." The system was overjoyed. It seemed that the host had made a decision. "Then, great host, when are you going to do that to your husband?" Tang Guo really wanted to block this system. When did it become so indecent? "In the future, when I meet a female system, I will definitely keep an eye out for you, Tongzi." After saying that, Tang Guo opened her eyes and stopped talking to the system. The system was a little regretful. Was it too complacent? "Your Majesty, you're awake?" Although Jing Cheng was reading, he was always paying attention to Tang Guo. He allowed her to lean on his body. Because of this, he had not moved for an hour. 4 martial artists, This wasn't a big deal. However, it was still tiring to maintain the same posture for a long time. Jing Cheng helped her up. Tang Guo found that her body was covered with a layer of blanket. It could be seen that Jing Cheng was also a careful person. He was actually afraid that she would catch a cold. I had a good sleep. Tang Guo stood up with a smile on her face. Seeing that Jing Cheng was stretching out his arm, she held his arm with both hands and asked with a smile, "Is it numb?" Jing Cheng wanted to say no, but the other party's gaze was too sharp. He could only answer, "It's a little numb." The imperial husband is truly a fool. Jing Cheng only smiled. There was nothing to be done. Who asked him to be in love with Her Majesty the Empress? He couldn't help but wake her up. Usually, she wouldn't sleep well. Now that she was sleeping so well, how could he bear to wake her up? "I like this place very much." Tang Guo helped to massage Jing Cheng's arm. At first, Jing Cheng was a little surprised, but now he was used to it. This should be a sign that the Empress liked him. How could he refuse? "Then Your Majesty has to come often," he said casually. Tang Guo burst out laughing, "Of course I have to come often. I sleep very well here." System, bullshit. The host sleeps very well everywhere. In any case, she has never seen her unable to sleep. When it came to coaxing men, she was really good at it. There was no repetition, and all of them fell on this guy. The next day, Su Qing and Nan Yunchuan both returned to the palace. Just like before, Nan Yunchuan often came to find Tang Guo, trying his best to show off. Chapter 899. On the other hand, Su Qing inadvertently revealed her talent and obtained Tang Guo's appreciation. For a time, the limelight of the two of them had overshadowed the imperial husband. Vaguely, there were many news of the imperial husband falling out of favor in the harem. They were all waiting for the imperial husband to be unable to sit still. In fact, most of the men in the harem hoped that the imperial husband could fight with the two of them, so that they could benefit from it. Unfortunately, Jing Cheng did not do as they wished. He stayed in his room all day long, and it was said that he practiced martial arts and swordsmanship in the palace every day. Because of this, many servants secretly cursed, "What a waste of the position of the imperial husband. If you like to practice swordsmanship so much, why bother to be the imperial husband?" Tang Guo was invited to the pavilion in the imperial garden every day. While listening to Su Qing's zither music, she played chess with Nan Yunchuan. When the two of them sat opposite each other, Tang Guo would often raise her head and smile in a certain direction. Su Qing and Nan Yunchuan basically did not notice, and occasionally they would think that Tang Guo was smiling at them. However, the position Tang Guo was looking at was the roof opposite the pavilion. The imperial husband, who was supposed to be practicing swordsmanship in the palace, was squatting in a corner of the roof, revealing a pair of eyes to stare at her. If she saw it at the first moment, she would definitely smile at him. Jing Cheng was also very depressed. He only secretly looked at what they were doing, but every time, he would be discovered by the Empress. Her Majesty would even smile at him, without any intention of blaming him. Her eyes were full of love and indulgence, making people's ears burn. How could this Empress not be liked? "Your Majesty, you have lost," Nan Yunchuan reminded. Tang Guo came back to her senses and found that she had indeed lost. System, host, have you heard of beauty that misleads people? "I lost." Tang Guo said to the chief steward beside her, "Go and get the white jade chess piece. Yunchuan is the most suitable for it." Nan Yunchuan was shocked. This white jade chess piece was His Majesty's beloved item. How could he give it away just like that? "Your Majesty, is this inappropriate?" "There's nothing inappropriate. Yunchuan is worthy." Nan Yunchuan's heart was still a little excited, especially when he saw Tang Guo looking at him with such indulgence. His heart was beating very fast. The Empress's treatment of him was getting better and better. Basically, she would agree to everything he wanted. If it wasn't for that, he would have given up on doing what he wanted. Yunchuan Su Qing's Su Qing's, Su. Fortunately, Su Qing reminded him. Otherwise, he would have already fallen into the Empress's gentleness. Tang Guo looked at Su Qing and said, "Some time ago, I got a guqin and gave it to the guqin master. I'll give it to Su Qing later. SS Qins, Su's of Qin of Su of Qin of Qin Qing. Su, of course of the of my, of course, of Su of Su. Of course of the of I of. All right, it's decided then. We still have other matters to attend to." The two of them watched Tang Guo leave with complicated feelings. They thought that Tang Guo was going back to deal with government affairs, but they didn't know that she had secretly gone to the imperial husband's palace. Jing Cheng was already sitting in his seat waiting for her. He looked at her and said, "Your Majesty is so generous. You gave away both the Qin and the white jade chess piece." He clearly knew that she had no thoughts about those two people, but he couldn't help but feel sour in his heart. He really wanted to press Her Majesty into his arms. "I am very generous," Tang Guo leaned in front of Jing Cheng. "There's another treasure that I didn't give away. How about I give it to you?" "What is it?" Jing Cheng was curious. Could it be another treasure sword? Tang Guo looked at him and knew what he was thinking. She leaned over and whispered in his ear, "Zhen." "What?" Jing Cheng's eyes widened. What did His Majesty mean? Chapter 900. To be honest, Jing Cheng's mind was in a mess. He had long known that the Empress was not serious in front of him and had a different side to her. In front of others, the Empress only had a few expressions. Under her serious face, it was impossible to guess the other party's thoughts. In front of him, the Empress's eyes were clear and bright. It was clear that the person she liked was him. Every time he was stared at by those eyes, his heart would burn with passion. He never thought that the other party would say such straightforward words. So, how should he respond to this sentence? How could he not seem too anxious, maintain his demeanor, and not let the Empress think that he was not enthusiastic enough? "Imperial husband, why are you in a daze? Don't you like such a treasure?" No, I like it very much." As soon as he heard Tang Guo's words, Jing Cheng was a little anxious and did not hesitate to speak out his feelings. After speaking, his ears were hot. Seeing Tang Guo's smiling eyes, he sighed in his heart. The Empress was teasing him again. However, seeing her happy, he was also very happy. He looked straight into Tang Guo's eyes and said again, "I like it very much. If Your Majesty is willing to give it to me, I am willing to cherish it with my life." If he had such an Empress as his companion for the rest of his life, he could forget about going to the battlefield and accompany the Empress in the palace. "Your Majesty, you suspect that there is something wrong with Nan Yunchuan and Su Qing. Do you need me to do anything?" Tang Guo ate a piece of cake and said, "You don't have to do anything. You just have to be the Empress's husband. It's not a big deal, I will deal with it. But I want to know." Facing the serious Jing Cheng, Tang Guo laughed. "All right, then I will tell you." She leaned closer to Jing Cheng and whispered, "They want my life." "What?" Jing Cheng suddenly stood up. His face was extremely serious, and there was a hint of anger. How dare they? If this was not the palace, he would have pulled out his sword and hacked the two people to death. Tang Guo raised her eyes and smiled. "Why wouldn't I dare? Not only do they want my life, they also want to overthrow the entire West Saint Empire's rule, re-establish male dominance, and restore the status of men." She didn't ask Jing Cheng what he thought of these things, but only expressed what those people wanted to do. Asking Jing Cheng this question, wasn't it making things difficult for him? As a man, there was almost no one who didn't want to raise their status, even if they were rich and lived a good life. Who wouldn't be willing to raise their status without any risk? On the contrary, even in those countries where women had a low status, even if they had been oppressed and numb, no one would be unwilling to raise their status if there was no risk. She was not prepared to raise the status of the men of the West Saint Empire. At least when she was ruling, she didn't want to do much. For the West Saint Empire to be where it is today, it was the result of the hard work of the empresses of the West Saint Empire. Not to mention whether she wanted to change or not, if she really wanted to restore their status as equals, it would take a lot of effort. Once there was a change in class, the West Saint nation would definitely fall into chaos. She couldn't stay here for long. The original owner of the body still had a few more years to live. In addition, she could also extend it by 20 years. What could she change? She had no interest in changing it. There must be a reason. In the future, without her here, the West Saint Empire might continue to rule, or it might be overthrown by someone. Chapter 901. Of course, it could also develop into a country where men and women were equal. All of these required a certain amount of time. This wasn't a chaotic world, and she wasn't that bored. She also didn't want to be a wise ruler and establish great achievements. When a country was in turmoil, the people wouldn't be able to make a living. Many great achievements were built on the suffering of the people and the lives of tens of thousands of people. How could those people who died in the midst of great achievements be similar to a female supporting character like her? Cannon fodder? She was just here for a trip, to fall in love, and to take revenge. System, here's a sigh. Host, you really understand. He liked this kind of host. That's right, treating every world as a trip. Fall in love, abuse scum, and a lifetime will pass. How comfortable. Imperial husband, don't think too much. They can't touch me. Tang Guo comforted Jing Cheng. As for them, we already have a plan. Your Majesty doesn't plan to kill them? Jing Cheng was surprised. According to Her Majesty's words, he could guess that the two weren't planning to kill them. We are also curious about how they plan to harm us and overthrow our West Holy Empire. Tang Guo smiled faintly. I also want to see if they will realize their mistakes and mend their ways after we treat them so well. If they realize their mistakes and mend their ways, Your Majesty will accept them again. Tang Guo found Jing Cheng's point of interest and shook her head. No, I can't tolerate betrayal. No matter if they realize their mistakes or mend their ways, it's impossible for them to return to the past. Jing Cheng relaxed. That's good. It's good that Your Majesty understands. Don't put people who betrayed you in important positions. This kind of person, if you don't pay attention, it's normal for them to betray you a second time. Of course, when he said this, he had a lot of selfish motives. If Her Majesty still accepted those two, he wouldn't be able to have her for himself. That's right, that was what he was thinking now. He only wanted to have her for himself. When this kind of possessiveness was born, even he himself was shocked. But as he interacted with the Empress, this feeling grew stronger and stronger. Now, he didn't want to control it anymore. He held Tang Guo's hand on the table. Your Majesty, if there's anything difficult, let me do it. Okay. Tang Guo didn't refuse. Since Jing Cheng is trying his best to show off, I won't stand on ceremony. Being called by the Empress, Jing Cheng felt his heart burn. He subconsciously picked up her hand and kissed the back of it. After the kiss, even he felt that this action was a little out of line. However, his intuition told him that the Empress would not be angry. Instead, she would be happy. Sure enough, when he raised his head, he saw the Empress's smiling face. At that time, she had thought that it would be great if she could kiss His Majesty's cheek. I'll do something next. Don't take it to heart, Jing Cheng. Tang Guo held Jing Cheng's hand. I'll be good to them. I want to see the result. Seeing her like this, Jing Cheng's heart ached a little. It was for her. She was the high and mighty Empress, but how many people below her were sincere to her? I know. He wanted to comfort her, but he didn't know what to say. He only said, I hope they can understand Your Majesty's kindness and don't do anything that they will regret. Even if the Empress couldn't dote on the men in the imperial harem, the Empress had always treated people fairly. All these years, no one had been wronged. After she talked things through with Jing Cheng, Tang Guo didn't hide the fact that she valued Nanyun Chuan at all. Chapter 902. Even Su Qing was a little behind. The entire harem knew that the Empress's most favored servant was Nan Yunchuan, young Master Nan. It could be said that no one could compare to her. Ranked second was Su Qing, young Master Su. That imperial husband, who had an illustrious family background, was only ranked third. Host, several of your servants went to find trouble with Nan Yunchuan before, and have been instigated by Nan Yunchuan. Nan Yunchuan was instigating them, asking them to send a message to their families, wanting to cooperate with them from the inside. Under the surveillance of the system, it could be said that no one could escape Tangua's eyes. Nan Yunchuan being favored would definitely be an eyesore to many people. If it was an ordinary man, he would definitely fight with the other party and even show off his strength. But Nan Yunchuan was different. His purpose was different. The more people there were, the more confident he and Su Qing would be in winning these people over to their side. Host, what are you going to do? Repeat what happened yesterday to me. Under the system's repetition, Tangua understood the reason. It was nothing more than Li Shijun not used to Nan Yunchuan being favored. Relying on his family background, he wanted to show off his strength to Nan Yunchuan. Unexpectedly, after the confrontation, he did not gain any advantage. He thought that Nan Yunchuan would not let him go. He also did not expect that Nan Yunchuan would have such an idea in the end. In fact, the people chosen by Nan Yunchuan were very easy to be instigated. These people were all men who had been bullied by women when they were young. That kind of humiliation was especially deep, which was why they were persuaded by Nan Yunchuan. It could be said that before he entered the palace, he had basically figured out the people in the palace. They first wanted to get rid of the imperial husband, Jing Cheng. The Jing family was also because the men of the Jing family grew up normally in the West Holy Empire and were rarely bullied. In the Jing family, the men's lives were also very good. Therefore, it was impossible to rope in the Jing family. There was no common goal, and the Jing family was also a royalist, so they could only be eliminated. This Li Shijun was different. His father was the legal wife, but because he was a man, he was laughed at by others. In the end, he became the Empress's servant, so his family did not dare to laugh at him and bully him. Now that Nan Yunchuan said this, his past grievances suddenly surfaced, and he naturally boarded Nan Yunchuan's pirate ship. After reading this, Tangua was silent for a moment before she called out, "Head Chief. Your Majesty, what are your orders?" "Order Li Shijun to be banished to the Cold Palace." The chief steward was shocked. She could no longer understand the reason behind His Majesty's actions. She had been by His Majesty's side since she was young. Sure enough, ordinary people could not guess the thoughts of the emperor. Li Shijun has openly offended Yunchuan. "I'm not happy." Tangua smiled faintly, and the head chief felt a chill run down his spine. He kept feeling that this was not the case, but everything here was decided by the empress. "Wait a minute." The chief steward hurriedly came back and saw Tangua walking to the side of the dragon table. She took out a piece of silk cloth and wrote a few words, "Give this to Lord Li secretly. He won't care about why Li Shijun is in the Cold Palace." "Yes, Your Majesty." The system glanced at the words on the silk cloth. It was a very straightforward sentence. "Lord Li, I didn't know that Li Shijun had the idea of overthrowing the female rule of the West Saint Nation." The system trembled. Lord Li was a woman, and he especially enjoyed the feeling of a woman having supreme power. If he knew what Li Shijun did, he would probably want to slap him to death. Chapter 903. Tangua banished Li Shijun to the Cold Palace with the excuse of offending Nan Yunchuan. No one in the harem expected the empress to do this. Even Nan Yunchuan himself did not expect this. Because of the previous incident with the silk cloth, Lord Li did not make a single splash. How could this be? Nan Yunchuan's mind was still a little muddled. Fortunately, he had spent half a day to persuade Li Shijun. In the end, the next day, Her Majesty banished Li Shijun to the Cold Palace because he had offended him. Su Qing frowned, but she couldn't think of a reason. They would not suspect that their purpose had been exposed. If it was really exposed, as the empress, Tangua would definitely not tolerate their existence. At that time, not only would Li Shijun be banished to the Cold Palace, but they would also be banished to the Cold Palace. Therefore, it was not their purpose that was exposed. It could only be that the Empress really valued Nan Yunchuan to the bottom of her heart. Both Nan Yunchuan and Su Qing only thought of this point. Su Qing felt that it was very troublesome. Nan Yunchuan's heart was very complicated, and he felt a little sour. He was scheming against the Empress here, and he might take her life in the future. But because a servant had offended him, she banished him to the cold palace. People's hearts were made of flesh, and it would be a lie to say that he was not moved. In the end, he sighed. He could only say that their positions were different, and they could not work together. If he wanted to blame someone, he could only blame himself for wanting to overthrow the Empress's rule. She happened to be the Empress of this generation, and they were destined to be enemies. Yunchuan, wake up. Even if she banished Li Shijun to the cold palace for you because she cares about you, don't forget that she is the Empress. If she cares about you today, she can also banish you to the cold palace tomorrow. Only when we stand in the highest position of power and control our own fate is the best. Don't be moved by some gentleness. Nan Yunchuan nodded. I know, I have never thought of giving up our ideals. From the moment we took the first step, there was no way back, right? Su Qing's expression eased a little. You'd better not go to the Empress often recently. It's good to get her trust and love, but I'm afraid that it will be too popular and cause others to be hostile. Got it. Nan Yunchuan also planned to see the Empress less recently. He went to see her every day, and every day, he would be faced with the Empress's focused eyes, as well as her repeated orders for him. He was almost unable to take it anymore. Su Qing looked at Nan Yunchuan's appearance and sighed. Why don't you call yourself sick? Wake up your brain and let me do it recently. All right. Nan Yunchuan agreed without any hesitation. If this continued, he didn't even know if he would be distracted by the Empress's good intentions. Claiming to be sick was not a bad idea. Su Qing narrowed her eyes. I have a very good plan. You claim to be sick and let someone diagnose you with infectious symptoms. It's best if you can be isolated for treatment. This way, you will have a chance to leave the palace and go to Tang Nuoyu. Nan Yunchuan thought of Tang Nuoyu's infatuated face and was a little unwilling. However, for the sake of their ultimate goal, they still agreed. On the other side, Tang Guo's expression was unclear when she heard their plan. I find it strange. Your Majesty, what are you curious about? Jing Cheng asked in confusion. Tang Guo held her chin and placed a piece before saying, no matter how good I am to them, they will choose to betray me. They clearly know the price of betraying me, but they still want to do it. Their hearts are moved, but they will still make such a choice. Do you think they will regret it? Would they? Nan Yunchuan, Su Qing, would these two people regret their decision today? Chapter 904. They will. Jing Cheng said. After placing his piece, he held Tang Guo's hand. One day, they will remember His Majesty's kindness and know what they have missed. Jing Cheng, if they knew what they would lose in the future, would they still make such a choice? This question stumped Jing Cheng. He shook his head and said, I don't know about that, because I won't make the wrong choice. I like His Majesty, and His Majesty likes me. I can see that His Majesty treats me well, and I also want to be with His Majesty. You know how to talk. Tang Guo's mood improved. Forget it, let's not care about them. If they don't want the chance, then don't blame me. She had given each of them a chance. It wasn't that it couldn't be salvaged, it was that they didn't want it. She would not be soft-hearted to those who wanted to harm her. In less than 2 days, Nan Yunchuan indeed claimed to be sick. No one knew what tricks the two of them had used, but they were actually diagnosed by the imperial physician as having an infectious disease and needed to be isolated for treatment. In order not to endanger the imperial palace and the Empress's health, the imperial physician suggested that they be sent out of the palace to recuperate. Tang Guo didn't agree at first. Of course, she did it on purpose. She still had to hesitate for a while. In the end, she agreed to the request of the entire court. Everyone knew how much the Empress cared about Nan Yunchuan. For him, she had almost put herself in danger. Just like that, Nan Yunchuan was still sent out of the palace to recuperate. As for when he would recover, the imperial physician did not give a definite message. In the past few days, Tangguo had to pretend to be unhappy and depressed. Occasionally, she would go to the imperial garden for a stroll. It was inevitable that Su Qing's zither would be able to help her relieve her boredom. Su Qing looked at the silent empress in front of her and occasionally looked at him. She sneered in her heart. Look, Nan Yunchuan, this is the empress. Even if you leave, there are still thousands of people who can take your place. If you die, the empress may only be sad for a short while and won't do anything because of you. So, what's the use of pampering? Power was the most important. Su Qing plays the zither very well. Su Qing replied, as long as His Majesty likes it. However, Su Qing's hand seems to be injured. It's better not to play. Only then did Su realize that because he was thinking about things and did not notice that his hand was cut. Call for the imperial physician. It's just a small wound, Your Majesty. There's no need to trouble the imperial physician. That won't do. Tangguo insisted on calling the imperial physician. She frowned and said, if Su Qing also has some disease like Yunchuan, then I will be very sad. Su Qing was startled. So the empress hadn't forgotten about the southern cloud river? In the past, you were familiar with Yunchuan. I could only vaguely feel Yunchuan's existence when I came to you. I wonder how he is now. Su Qing looked at the empress who was immersed in her memories and felt a little uncomfortable. He knew this wasn't a good feeling, but being treated as Nan Yunchuan's substitute by the empress, this feeling was even worse. He and Nan Yunchuan were equally matched. He had never thought that the reason why the empress listened to his zither for half a month was because of Nan Yunchuan. Tangguo felt Su Qing's thoughts and laughed in her heart. She knew the thoughts of these men the best. Su Qing, you must take care of your body. Don't make me worry. Such words of concern were different in Su Qing's ears. The empress was clearly afraid that he would be the same as Nan Yunchuan. If he was also sick, she would have no place to miss Nan Yunchuan. Chapter 905. Your Majesty cares so much about Su Qing, is it because of Yunchuan? Su Qing finally confirmed that when the empress looked at him, it was as if she was looking at another person through him. He shouldn't care who the empress liked, but the feeling of being used as a substitute made him feel especially uncomfortable. After blurting out this sentence, he regretted it in his heart. It was really inappropriate to ask such a stupid question in front of the empress. If he angered the empress, all his previous efforts would have been in vain. Your Majesty, please forgive me. Su Qing shouldn't have asked about this. Tangguo came back to her senses. Do you think I'm looking at Yunchuan through you? Isn't it? Su Qing asked subconsciously. Tangguo shook her head. It's easy for me to think of Yunchuan here, but I'm very clear about the two of you. Your temperaments are also different. Yunchuan is active and lively. He likes to laugh and say funny things to please me. With him around, I'm in a good mood all day. No matter how many troubles I have, when I hear his voice, they will all disappear. She wasn't lying. This was how the original owner felt about Nan Yunchuan. At the age of 10, she ascended the throne and became the empress. Every day in the imperial court, no matter how mature she was still a young girl. After so many years of tension, how could she not like a person like Nan Yunchuan who suddenly appeared? She liked Nan Yunchuan very much. It wasn't the love between men and women, but Nan Yunchuan always had a way to make her feel good. The depression she encountered in the imperial court would dissipate after facing Nan Yunchuan. It was also because of Nan Yunchuan that she would occasionally smile, even if it was shallow. Even if she couldn't reveal too many thoughts to Nan Yunchuan, she still liked to stay with him. In the original owner's memory, there was a sentence to describe her impression of Nan Yunchuan. A pair of bright eyes, a lazy voice with a smile, sounded relaxed and comfortable. Su Qing was stunned by Tangguo's words. So in the empress's heart, Nan Yunchuan's image was like this. He was a little curious about what impression he had left in the empress's heart. And Su Qing, you give me the feeling that you are always immersed in your own world. You are different from Yunchuan. He brings me laughter, while you bring me tranquility. Listening to the sound of your zither makes me feel very peaceful, and it is also a rare peace. This was also the feeling of the original owner. The reason why she was good to these two people was not without reason. Perhaps they were working too hard, or perhaps the Empress was truly too tired. The sudden appearance of these two different people naturally left a deep impression on her. In front of them, it was inevitable that he would let his guard down. I have to face all kinds of problems every day. Even if I am the Empress, sitting high up in the imperial court, and tens of thousands of people bow down to me. But not everyone is convinced by me. In this West Saint nation, whether men or women, they are all eyeing me covetously. Many men hope that the Western Holy Empire will be overthrown and that the rule of women being superior to men will end. And many women hope that one day they can replace me, stand in my position and rule the West Saint Empire. When Tangguo said this, Su Qing's heart skipped a beat. Fortunately, he heaved a sigh of relief when he heard the latter part of the sentence. He already regretted it. Why did he care about this problem? It's Su Qing's fault for making Your Majesty think of these troublesome things. How about Su Qing play a song for Your Majesty? Su Qing quickly said, trying to change the topic. Chapter 906. No, I still have work to do. Tangguo refused. It was almost time for dinner. She had to accompany her husband for dinner. I'll come back tomorrow. When Tangguo was about to turn around, she thought of something. By the way, the next time you leave the palace, Su Qing, help me see how Yunchuan is doing. You have the best relationship in the palace. You should go see him, right? Su Qing's heart was complicated, but she replied calmly. Yes, Su Qing will go. After visiting Yunchuan, Su Qing will immediately come back to report to Your Majesty. Your Majesty, don't worry. Yunchuan will definitely be fine. That's good. Su Qing watched as the Empress left in a hurry. Her heart was filled with complicated feelings that she could not get rid of. He looked at his cherished Guqin and then looked at all the things at hand. Which one of them was not given to him by the Empress? Unknowingly, the items given to him by the Empress had occupied his palace. He shook his head and put away his complicated gaze. Perhaps when Yunchuan came back, he would have to be sick for a while. Anyone who was treated like this by the Empress would gradually lose their heart. Even he was not sure. He would always have a heart of stone and would not be moved. But now, he was wavering, wasn't he? Host, Su Qing was also wavering. He is wavering, but he still won't change his mind. He will only think that this is human nature, and he will think of a way to overcome this problem. Su Qing is more rational than Nan Yunchuan. He always knows what he wants. In the past, he did succeed. His success point is that his heart is hard enough. For the sake of his goal, it can be said that he will do anything. It should be said that this group of men all have a common characteristic. Their hearts are hard. In order to achieve their goals, they can sacrifice their dignity and appearance. It had to be said that such a person could easily achieve great things. Unless there was an outsider like her, who had to be countless times stronger than them, it would not be easy to be schemed against. She was familiar with everything in the plot. With her countless experience, she was not afraid and worried about what these people would do. If there was no her, there would only be a reborn Tang Nuoyu. She might not be a match for the other party. She might even repeat the same mistake. Tangguo's lips curled up. She first returned to her own palace and then secretly went to Jing Cheng's palace. The head chief was already used to the Empress's style and did not mind at all. He did not follow her, but stood guard outside the Empress's palace, pretending that she was inside. Where did you go to Su Qing again? Jing Cheng and Tangguo were becoming more and more familiar with each other. After interacting with her for a long time, he subconsciously didn't treat her as a high and mighty empress when they were alone. It was like two people who were very close to each other. When they got along, it was really very comfortable. Your Majesty, how much longer? Jing Cheng asked. Tangguo grinned. Can't wait any longer. I just hope that your majesty can relax a little and not waste your energy on some ungrateful people. It's no trouble at all. Just treat it as fun. Soon. Tang Guo picked up some food for Jing Cheng. It will be over soon. When the time comes, I will dismiss the harem. How about you alone? Jing Cheng's heart skipped a beat, and he quickly said, Is your majesty joking? Although he did want to have the empress alone, could this harem be dismissed just like that? Jing Cheng, you don't believe me? I believe your majesty, but I don't want to make things difficult for your majesty. Chapter 907. Tang Guo was amused and couldn't help but touch his face. It's so cute. I don't like them, so why should I keep them in the palace to waste their time? If your majesty lets them out, will they really be able to find a good home? Jing Cheng couldn't help but ask. It might be even harder than in the palace. Tang Guo was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, Then what do you think? This question was thrown back, and Jing Cheng was stumped. That's right. If he didn't let them out and stayed in the palace, what should they do? He thought that if he monopolized the empress, those men in the palace might be able to have a good ending. Then he was annoyed. Was he asking for too much? It was already these people's fortune to meet such an empress. Jing Cheng is thinking too much. Jing Cheng smiled in relief. If your majesty is willing to let them out of the palace, it's also their fortune. He wouldn't lie and let them stay. He wanted to have the empress by himself, which was an idea he had a long time ago. Tang Guo saw through Jing Cheng's thoughts and didn't expose him. Those men in the harem were pitiful and not pitiful. They all came for a purpose. She didn't sympathize with them, nor would she treat them unfairly. Of course, the premise was that they didn't betray her. While Nan Yunchuan was recuperating in the palace, Tang Guo went to Su Qing's place every day to listen to the zither. The trend of the harem had begun to change again. As for Nan Yunchuan, he didn't recuperate outside the palace. Instead, he took advantage of this time to contact Tang Nuoyu. With his glib tongue, he was able to coax Tang Nuoyu into running around in circles. At this time, Tang Nuoyu was trapped between Xiao Jin and Nan Yunchuan. Of course, this was a little conflict. After all, she already had Xiao Jin, and now there was another Nan Yunchuan. According to her initial temperament, she definitely wouldn't immediately do anything with Nan Yunchuan. But how could two people who liked each other not let Xiao Jin see something? Just like that, the three of them each had their own thoughts and acted out a show of deep affection. Tang Guo watched Tang Nuoyu with great interest every day, especially when her acting skills were getting better and better. If she had not watched the whole process, she would have thought that Tang Nuoyu was just a naive and sweet girl. I have to say, when a person is bullied, their potential is limitless. Tang Guo stood up with a smile on her face. I should also go and see Yunchuan, whom I miss every day. System, shivering in the corner, he glanced outside the palace again, at Nan Yunchuan's courtyard. Tang Nuoyu and Nan Yunchuan were fighting fiercely. What was the host planning to do? Could it be that he was planning to crash into that Azura field? What should he do? He was still looking forward to it. Head steward, pick some things that Yunchuan likes for me and bring more supplements. I suddenly want to go out of the palace to see how he is. The chief steward's mouth twitched. She finally understood a little of His Majesty's thoughts. In her heart, she actually liked the imperial husband. On the surface, she was most affectionate with Nan Yunchuan. But she still didn't understand why His Majesty would have two sides. What was the purpose of doing all this? Of course, since His Majesty had ordered, she would definitely do as he asked. Even if she knew that he didn't like Nan Yunchuan, she would still do her best to pick out the things that Nan Yunchuan liked, and they had to be of the highest quality. His Majesty didn't like Nan Yunchuan, but he didn't verbally admit it, did he? So the people under them just had to do as they were told. Chapter 908. After taking the things, Tang Guo changed her clothes and left the palace with the chief steward and a few guards. She didn't alarm anyone. It was easy for an empress to see Nan Yunchuan without alerting anyone. Even the people left to her by the late emperor could do these things. The chief steward followed behind with trepidation. She always felt that something would happen today. She secretly glanced at the excited empress. It seemed that she didn't miss Nan Yunchuan too much. But when they left the palace and sat in the carriage, the empress's expression became worried and anxious. The chief steward secretly wiped the cold sweat. She had followed the empress since she was young. She didn't know that the empress had such a side. This face change was faster than flipping a book. System, that's because you don't know what a drama queen is. As for how a drama queen is born, you can ask his host for the specifics. Not long after, Tang Guo arrived at the courtyard where Nan Yunchuan was recuperating. Because she told people in advance that no one was allowed to go in to report. There were obviously people from Nan Yunchuan here, but because the empress's people were watching covetously, they could only sweat in the same place. There was no chance to go in to report. So, when Tang Guo walked in, she thought that she would see her sweetheart who had been missing for a long time. She didn't expect that what she saw was her sweetheart and her sister laughing and playing. Especially because Tang Nuoyu accidentally fell, Nan Yunchuan subconsciously caught her. The two people looked at each other and thought that this was a very suitable time to develop feelings. So, when Tang Guo stepped in, the two people's lips were touching. System, wow, it's really explosive. It's really not in vain. Chief steward, she knew that something would happen. She knew that she shouldn't be too curious and follow. Tang Guo raised her eyebrows. The development was faster than she imagined. It was hard on Tang Nuoyu. Without her cooperation, Nan Yunchuan wouldn't be so smooth. The two people also felt that something was wrong. They quickly turned around and saw Tang Guo standing there. Tang Guo's expression changed from interest to indifference. She stared straight at Nan Yunchuan. There were many people standing beside her. In their hands, she had brought out all the good things for Nan Yunchuan. Tang Nuoyu was also stunned. She really did not expect that the empress would come at this time. In his previous life, the empress did not leave the palace at all. That was why she did her best to cooperate with Nan Yunchuan's act. She didn't have any psychological burden at all. Empress younger sister what you see is all an illusion, I really don't want to touch your man. Besides, this man really wasn't a good person. I think that imperial husband of yours isn't bad. He's loyal and will never betray you. That man is a scum. Don't get violent over him. You want to kill your own sister. Tang Nuoyu was about to cry. The one who wanted to cry even more was Nan Yunchuan, especially when he saw the empress, who would usually smile at him, return to her usual indifferent and distant expression. His heart ached. He wasn't even sure, but in that instant, it seemed as if something had slipped away. He wanted to grab hold of it, but he couldn't. He opened his mouth, wanting to explain something, but he couldn't explain what had just happened. At this time, he and Tang Nuoyu were still hugging each other. Thinking of this, he quickly let go of Tang Nuoyu. Tang Nuoyu also quickly jumped up. She wanted to explain something, but like Nan Yunchuan, she didn't know how to explain. Chapter 909. If she had known earlier, she would have used other methods. Why did she have to take such a risk? Because of a stinky man, the two sisters would become enemies. Greetings, Your Majesty. The two reacted and hurriedly saluted. Nan Yunchuan knelt on the ground with his head lowered. He didn't dare to look at the empress in front of him. He didn't expect that one day, the empress would see such a scene. What was even more unexpected was that after being caught in such a scene, he didn't think about whether he would be sentenced to death by the empress. Instead, his mind was full of how to explain to prove his innocence. However, what happened between him and Tang Nuoyu just now couldn't be explained at all. The more he tried to explain, the more it felt like he was quibbling, so he just knelt on the ground and didn't say a word. Tang Nuoyu also had a headache. The empress didn't get angry, which made her more afraid than getting angry. She didn't want history to repeat itself. She didn't want to fall out with her Empress sister for a stinky man. You don't even want to explain? When Tang Nuoyu heard this, her heart relaxed. These words were not said to her. It seemed that the fire didn't necessarily burn on her head. You have been sick for a long time. I was very worried. I deliberately put down my official affairs and went out of the palace to see you. I didn't expect to see such a scene. Head steward, even the Empress looks serious when she's lying. I thought you were seriously ill, Tangwa said with an indifferent face, but her eyes were sad. Seeing you today, I'm afraid you are not sick. Nan Yunchuan quickly raised his head. As soon as the two words Your Majesty came out, he didn't know how to continue. Could he say that he was actually sick, but recovered quickly? How could Her Majesty the Empress believe such a clumsy excuse? The more he explained, the more disgusted she would be with him. Yes, at this time, he was not afraid of death. He was only afraid that she would look at him with disgust. So, you said you were sick and went out of the palace to see her. Tang was suddenly understood, which made Nan Yunchuan panic. No, how could it be because of Tang Nuoyu, this stupid woman? Her Majesty was so good. How could he abandon Her Majesty and like Tang Nuoyu? Tang Nuoyu, why do I feel that something is wrong? Does the Empress mean that she won't kill them? She secretly glanced at the Empress's sad expression at this moment. Even Tang Nuoyu felt pity for the Empress. The Empress's sad voice sounded, which made Tang Nuoyu's eyes widen. Wait, little sister. Isn't this a bit wrong? Nan Yunchuan was also a bit confused. But when he saw the Empress's indifferent expression and her disappointed and sad eyes, his heart also twitched. He wanted to say something, but Tangwa spoke first. From today onwards, Nan Yunchuan will no longer be in my harem. He died suddenly because of illness. Nan Yunchuan, Moon King. Since you two like each other, I will make the decision today. You can take him into your residence. Tang Nuoyu. Nan Yunchuan's heart sank, and his face became pale. He looked at Tang Guo. She only looked at him, and that look was full of disappointment. Chapter 9-10. He wanted to get up and say something, but Tang Guo didn't give him a chance. Moon King, since he likes you so much, in order to get along with you, he didn't hesitate to deceive me and leave the palace by claiming to be sick. It can be seen that he is sincere to you. Tang Guo sighed. You are my sister. Before Imperial Mother passed away, I promised to take good care of you. As for him, you should treat him well. Tang Guo paused and waved to the chief steward. Leave everything here. I'm going back to the palace. Your Majesty. Nan Yunchuan was really anxious, his eyes were red. In that instant, he finally understood what he had lost. He had lost the Empress's sincerity. Sincerity, the Empress's sincerity. Not only did he lose the Empress's sincerity, he had also completely trampled on her heart. Looking at her determined look, he only felt his heart was so sad that it hurt so much that it shrank. Was it all wrong from the beginning? Even if he wanted to overthrow the Western Holy Empire, he shouldn't have deceived her feelings. At this last moment, he realized that he had fallen deeply into her gentleness. A cold empress had actually given her heart to him. He tore it apart with his own hands. These are all the things you like. I will send someone to deliver them to you. No, Your Majesty, that's not what Yunchuan meant. Nan Yunchuan wanted to explain, but how could Tang Guo give him a chance? Her lips curled up into a faint smile. That smile dazzled Nan Yunchuan's eyes. She said, let's do it well. Yunchuan, I used to like the stories you told me. It was really interesting to listen to them. However, from today onwards, I don't like them anymore. With that, she left. Nan Yunchuan wanted to chase after her, but he couldn't catch up to her at all. He looked at the items on the ground, all of which he liked. He suddenly knelt on the ground in a sorry state, his eyes red and his heart aching. Tang Nuoyu was also a little speechless. So, because the Empress liked Nan Yunchuan too much, she couldn't bear to kill him, and even tolerated him having someone he liked. Now, she wanted to help them. Understanding this, Tang Moyu looked at Nan Yunchuan with even more disgust. Scumbag. Deceiving underage girls. Yunchuan, are you okay? Although Tang Moyu did not want to be entangled with this scumbag, she still had to continue the act. After all, she was now a naive and sweet girl. She carefully moved to Nan Yunchuan's side and reached out to help him, but was pushed away by Nan Yunchuan. Go, don't worry about me. Her Majesty no longer wanted him. It was he who threw away Her Majesty's sincerity. It was his fault that she had witnessed this scene. It was useless to say anything now. His Majesty had made up his mind. Everything that happened today was not a misunderstanding. He had no chance at all. He would never have the chance to see His Majesty. Yunchuan, the ground is cold. Get up first and then talk. Tang Moyu pursed her lips and said with a sobbing tone, "What's the matter? Let's go back to the mansion first, okay?" "No, I'm not going." If he went, he would be one of the Moon King's men. He was not going. He wanted to stay here. This was the courtyard that His Majesty had bought for him. Even if he were to die, he would not leave this place. At this time, Nan Yunchuan had completely forgotten his purpose, which was to overthrow the Empress's rule. His mind was only filled with the fact that he had lost Her Majesty, the Empress who was sincere to him. He had lost her. Nan Yunchuan finally couldn't hold it in anymore. He slammed his fists on the ground and cried silently. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.